The news. Catastrophe on the coast.
Tonight, darkness falls, hiding the destruction along the Gulf Coast. You are looking live at the very place the eye of the catastrophic Hurricane Charley came ashore. Good evening, everybody. Disaster really doesn't even begin to explain it.
No, Charley obliterating parts of the West Coast. The death toll at 13, but likely will rise. The number of people homeless in the thousands, and the cost of the damage in the billions.
The hardest hit areas, Fort Myers and its barrier islands, Arcadia and Punta Gorda as well, those communities. And that is where we find the night team's Charles Belay to begin our night team coverage. Charles?
Good evening, Craig and Belkis. We can tell you that you have been seeing the pictures we have been sending back all day. That's when the sun was out. But at night, there are no lights here because there's no electricity. It is pitch black. However, we did light up something that I thought was interesting that I wanted to show to the viewers. I'm going to step out of the way and let you know that we are standing where a gas station once was. There was a Coke machine and a Pepsi machine here. The Pepsi machine is laying about 500 feet away from where it was standing. The Coke machine is over there in that parking lot after Charley picked it up, slammed it into cars, and flipped it over there. That is just part of a very big mess.
Tony and Eleanor.
Punta Gorda looks like a war zone, and this condo complex could be the icon. A twisted mess of concrete, metal crossbeams, 2x4s, and glass lay in piles. Places like this are everywhere in Charlotte County, hardest hit by Charley.
I got to get a roofer, I got to get something for inside. I can't open the garage door, I can't get the car out. Refrigerators, finished, that's it, wiped off the map.
An aerial view of Punta Gorda and surrounding areas shows the scope of the damage and Charley's power. This is the way Governor Jeb Bush saw it. 10 people confirmed dead here and bodies still waiting to be removed.
Oh, there's dead bodies down off of Florida Street. There's an old couple they found last night that couldn't get out because the husband was bedridden.
Many residents escaped death by mere minutes, like Troy Horde and his wife. This 20,000-pound Royal Palm split their home in two.
As we were leaving, 5 minutes after we left, or less, the house exploded. When we came back after the storm, we found our way through the neighborhood. Our neighbors all came walking over. They were still white as a ghost and said, "We thought you guys were dead."
Businesses fared no better. Hundreds of buildings leveled. Debris is everywhere, making travel along Route 17 and 42 difficult, and in some areas, impossible. There is still no power here, no phone service, no food. Hundreds walk aimlessly through the streets, their cars crushed, their homes reduced to rubble, and nowhere to go.
It is nightfall here in Punta Gorda, and there is a curfew tonight. We have seen a lot of police vehicles. We've seen a lot of fire rescue vehicles, as well as the U.S. Army and National Guard here keeping an eye out for looters. And they want everybody off the streets, unless, of course, there are people who are in this area that can still be inside of their homes. But a lot of those people have left, going either north or south to try and find hotel rooms because there's no power, like I said, no phone service, no food, no water. There is nothing here. We can tell you that at tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, the President of the United States, President Bush, will arrive at Charlotte Airport. He will assess the damage and receive a report on the damage level here. We already know that this has been declared a disaster area. It is also in a state of emergency. The President wants to see this firsthand. We will be there, and we will bring that to you tomorrow. That's the situation tonight in Punta Gorda. I'm Charles Belay, 7 News Night Team.
And from you, Charles, night team coverage continues now with the search for survivors. 7's Lynn Gordon joins us now with that tonight. Lynn?
Good boy, let's go. Go search, go find him.
As we're canvassing the area, we have our teams divided into two. We have 2 dogs, and we have about 14 people on each team, which covers everything from structural engineers to physicians, paramedics. Everyone's a firefighter, and we're going through each and every possibility to make sure that nobody's in there.
They're searching house by house in mobile homes throughout Charlotte County. Miami-Dade's urban search and rescue team leaving no stone unturned, looking for possible survivors of Hurricane Charley, possibly still trapped underneath the endless amounts of twisted metal.
There's certain signs. Obviously, if someone's in front of the house and you say, how you doing, and you say everything is fine, we don't need to go in and search that home. We usually try to look at the houses that look like they're livable, but there's nobody there. There's certain signs. Like I said, back here we have a lot of cars that have debris on them, which leads us to believe that that vehicle was here during the storm.
The dogs are searching for the scent of live victims. So far, no one has been found dead or alive.
They are taught to learn to smell for live human scent, and what they do is they search up into the wind. 50 members of the South Florida Urban Search and Rescue Team are here at the request of the local government. Many of these firefighters were deployed after Hurricane Andrew, looking at the people's faces, bringing back memories from 14 years ago.
We seem to notice that the people, when we first went out on the first day, they kind of have the same stare on their face, and they seem like they really don't know what's the next step, what they're going to do. It's almost like they're shell-shocked.
And those rescuers tell me that right after Andrew, a lot of the firefighters and paramedics from here, from Charlotte County and up and down the southwest Gulf Coast, came over to South Florida to help out. That's why they feel like they are paying back a favor. We are live in Punta Gorda. I'm Lynn Gordon, 7 News Night Team.
All right, Lynn.
Well, as we mentioned, millions of people did heed the warnings to evacuate.
But for a self-proclaimed storm chaser, that was never a thought. The night team Sharon Melton is live in the Satellite Center with this story and these pictures. Sharon?
And some amazing pictures they are. The thrill of capturing Charley on tape far outweighing the risk for one man, a photographer who lives to catch history on tape.
Right now, the time is roughly 4:37. We are watching a neighborhood disintegrate. This is Hurricane Charley. For the past 5 minutes or so, we have been experiencing winds in excess of 100 miles an hour. I'm wondering if we got hit by a tornado. I don't know. Everyone want to know what it looks like inside a Category 4 hurricane. This is it. It is tearing off roofs.
Jim Reed says he works with professional meteorologists who track the storm for him.
I'm a professional storm chaser and extreme weather photographer. I've been studying hurricanes for several years. This was my 10th, and I was looking forward to learning as much from this hurricane as possible.
Oh my God, here comes another one. It's bad. It's bad.
Reed admits what he does is dangerous.
Hang on, Greg. Hang on.
But says in the case of Charley, he just got caught up by a fast-moving, unpredictable storm.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
The carport that I believe you see in the video is what we refer to as a shelter of last resort.
Are you okay?
And of course, while he admits this is exciting,
Category 4 hurricane. I hope I'm recording.
it's for the professionals. For the rest, don't try this at home.
If you're told to evacuate, you need to evacuate.
Now remember, he says this is not for amateurs. This is a dangerous business, but the experts use a lot of specialized equipment and have years of training to help them chase a storm and capture it all on tape. Live in the Satellite Center, Sharon Melton, 7 News 19.
Well, Sharon, as you know, so much has been made of the impact on Charlotte County and the town of Punta Gorda, but the barrier islands of Sanibel and Captiva, among others, took a hard hit as well.
7 Skyforce touring the battered Gulf Coast. Charley's path of destruction is clear.
There's a hangar that sustained damage to the roof. Also see the sheriff's office command post over here.
Channel 7's Ralph Rayburn passing miles and miles of debris-scattered fields.
Our mobile home community, I think, is just shattered and wrecked.
In Arcadia, mobile homes blown over, scattered like matchbox toys abandoned by a child.
The only thing that seemed to have withstood it fully is the clubhouse to this community here.
Leaving residents behind to clean up.
People trying to pick up the pieces here.
In Live Oak, a church, or maybe it was a school, crumpled like paper.
Like somebody just stepped on the front end of it. Giant foot.
A few miles away, a diner, the roof ripped off, exposing the tables inside, still set for dinner.
Diner with tablecloth still on the table. The roof's gone, rest of the structure's gone.
The reality of Charley's wrath slowly sinking in.
Morning Star along the water. Got some people out back here taking a look at surveying damage.
The barrier islands of Sanibel and Captiva, Charley changed their landscape, literally.
That is the pass that was created when Hurricane Charley tore through Upper Captiva. That was one island yesterday. It is 2 islands today.
Evidence of the power of Charley everywhere, from boats blown on shore to a bent antenna.
Broken antenna here, the north end of, way north of Captiva.
The million-dollar homes on both islands are still standing, though they were damaged.
Everything off there, tiles, tar paper.
Streets are flooded, looking more like canals.
Sand came in and filled this thing in completely here.
And the causeway you could once drive a boat under, now a bridge over sand.
And other communities like Fort Myers Beach, Venice, and Naples report damage, but of course nothing compared to the destruction we've been seeing to the north in Charlotte County. Belkis.
Well, Craig, Governor Bush getting a first-hand look at the catastrophe on the coast. Mr. Bush taking to the skies with emergency management teams and a helicopter to see the extent of the devastation from above, as we just saw. The governor, though, reassuring residents that much-needed help is on the way.
The trip that we took on the Blackhawks just, you know, points out the magnitude of this. This is our worst fears have come true, and my heart goes out to people that right now are homeless, are scared, and all I can assure you is that the team assembled here, and literally thousands of other people from across the country, both from government and from just people that are going to be organized to act on their hearts to help, will be here.
Well, President Bush, meanwhile, declaring 4 counties eligible for disaster relief. They are Lee, Charlotte, Sarasota, and Manatee counties. They're all going to receive federal dollars. President Bush saying storm victims are in his thoughts and prayers.
We have deployed resources to help. I've declared an emergency, and the process is now in place to aid, provide federal aid to those who may be affected by this hurricane.
And as we just heard from Charles Belay, the president will be in Southwest Florida tomorrow to see the extent of the devastation firsthand.
As we've been seeing in the tape tonight, countless people have been left now with pretty much nothing.
But they are all counting their blessings to have simply survived this storm. Night Team coverage takes us back live to Punta Gorda, and that is where Derek Hayward has some of their incredible stories. Derek?
Well, Belkis, while a lot of people are returning to the area today and tonight and tomorrow to find most of what they own here totally destroyed, looking like that, which is much of the scene in Punta Gorda tonight, thousands of others stayed and rode out the storm, mistakenly believing it was going to strike farther north.
We're trying to cook some dinner. We're out of power. Probably won't have power for 4 to 6 weeks.
Work crews and police saturate Charlotte County, backed up by the Florida National Guard, as nervous residents survey the destruction of their homes.
I was praying. I was seriously praying for our lives.
And we barricaded ourselves in here, and you know, it's like wood and cement, so we made it and put mattresses up against.
As night fell, roads remained dangerous to navigate, littered with huge chunks of debris and downed power lines. Earlier, convoys of helpers poured into town. This one comprised of Miami police, Hialeah police, and civilian volunteers to do whatever they could for 90-year-old Mary McCarty and thousands of her neighbors.
I stayed right in there. My carport top went off, and when it went off, the two big windows in the living room come in, and that's when I took him and we went to the bathroom. And I had a sliding door in the bathroom, you know, so I just stood there with both hands against the door, prayed.
How long have you lived there?
37 years, right there.
What are you going to do now?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out, what I'm going to do.
It's almost hard to believe this was a home. I mean, it's buried by this huge tree.
Yes, sir.
And you were in there when the storm came through?
Yes, sir. The eye came over. Me and Dave, my neighbor here, were in the house. It was like a bomb had went off, sir. It was unbelievable. The tree fell.
Are you surprised to find you're in one piece?
Yes, sir, very much. I mean, I'll never do it again. I'll leave as soon as they say get out.
And now tonight here in much of Charlotte County, the only illumination that there is from our lights and from the lights from generators powered by other news teams that have come into the area. Every street in Punta Gorda and the surrounding area is totally pitch black. There is no electricity in this area at all. Fortunately, helping out local police and the Highway Patrol, we have Miami-Dade Police here, we have the Broward County Sheriff's Office, Miami Police, Hialeah Police, a huge contingent from South Florida on patrol tonight to try to make sure there is no looting in the darkness. In Punta Gorda, reporting live, Derek Hayward, 7 News.
Derek. Left behind from Hurricane Charley. As the rain and wind began hitting the area overnight, people trying to find shelter anywhere they could, not realizing what was in store for them just a few hours later. The storm's power felt in full force at Orlando's International Airport. Glass and shingles torn off the roof was the least of airport officials' worries. Get a load of this, a hangar flattened, planes torn apart like a child's toy, and the pieces scattered everywhere.
What we have experienced in Orange County is a very devastating storm. As you ride around our neighborhoods, you will see a good deal of damage to property.
Blowing winds and rain was the first thing to greet people in Daytona Beach. The first sign Hurricane Charley was in town.
We lost 3 of the big plate glass windows, lost a lot of windows out of the rooms with the ACs in them.
As the sun came up, businesses and homes were flattened by Hurricane Charley.
I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life.
Really?
When those winds got up there, it sounded like there was 1,000 guys marching up on our roofs.
In Jacksonville, visibility was almost to a minimum as Charley's wrath could be felt around the area. The hurricane throwing around everything in its path with no mercy for anything or anyone. Charley didn't stop when it came to South Carolina either. Gusts in some cases picking up speed after leaving Florida and hitting open water. At times the storm was so devastating one news crew could barely hold on.
It's moving, it's moving! It's moving! Hey! Ah, the dog is moving! The dog is moving!
And their neighbor just north on Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina, feeling the brunt of Charley in the form of huge waves and high winds. While the hurricane was downgraded to a tropical storm at this point, even brave souls like this man hitting the beach realized a little too late that the force of Mother Nature can still be intense. Well, so far, hundreds of thousands of people are still without power tonight throughout the Carolinas, along with North and Central Florida.
Depressions, Tropical Depression 5 and 4. Well, now you can forget the numbers and we can talk some names. The latest advisory officially makes Hurricane Danielle the 3rd hurricane of this Atlantic season. Tropical Storm Earl closer to us, officially the 5th named storm of the year. Now, the reason they reverse is because TD4 was the first to develop in TD5, so when the advisories came down, we're out of order as far as alphabetically, but things are in line. So we're not going to worry about Danielle too much, and we'll show you why here in just a minute, but I want to concentrate on Earl. These are the 11 o'clock coordinates, less than 2,000 miles now from Miami. It's down to the east-southeast. It is forecasted to continue to move to the west-northwest, currently doing so at 25 miles per hour at a pretty good clip. That's going to keep the storm from rapidly intensifying because it's moving too fast. The pressure right now above 1,000 millibars of winds, just a touch over tropical storm force. 39 is that threshold that we need before we can officially call it a tropical storm. On the satellite imagery, notice it's developing a pretty good ball of convection right here through the middle, and the white here on the enhanced satellite imagery showing the outflow in the upper levels getting a little more well organized. We saw this same type of imagery with Charley in its initial stages. So definitely a storm we're going to keep our eye on, as it is forecasted to increase in intensity and eventually become a Category 2 hurricane somewhere south of Cuba. Now, this is the forecast forecasted track of Earl, again, eventually moving on south of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. By Wednesday evening, it'll be south of Cuba, and by Thursday, somewhere entering the Gulf of Mexico. From the last advisory, notice Miami out of the cone of air, and right now that is great news, but remember, take this with a huge grain of salt. Again, a far distance, almost 2,000 miles from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, a lot can change in these stirring currents in the next couple of days. So this is a storm we're going to keep our eye on, because we all know these storms getting through here and they've kind of got a mind of our own, and we saw that unpredictability with Charley over the last day or so. We've also got, again, the third hurricane of the season, Danielle. 75 miles per hour, just above that threshold. The winds are out of the west-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Pressure at 987 millibars. Here's the satellite imagery. It's there moving its way off the Cape Verde Islands. We're approaching that Cape Verde season where we start to see these storms develop further off, closer to Africa, and continue to track in this direction. The good news about Danielle, taking a drastic turn off to the north and eventually the west before turning east. We can check Danielle off the list. It will not impact us here in the U.S., and that is great news. We'll have more on your...
But then we noticed that the island had been covered.
Northeast from us here as Charley was making his way across Florida. You can see the driving rain coming down in sideways sheets, and pretty much the winds taking down anything in their path. Now, as they assess the impressive aftermath, officials are also doing the math, and it's expected to be equally impressive, of course, in all the wrong ways. 13 people now confirmed dead, hundreds more reported missing. Thousands have been left homeless, many of them here in the Punta Gorda area. The damage estimated into the billions of dollars. Of course, that will take some time to tally yet. And Charley has been officially hailed the strongest storm in a dozen years, only second, of course, to his cousin, Andrew, who we all know so well by now. Now, stick around with us, of course. We will be back tomorrow for day 2 of the...
Difícil es que no hay nadie quien te ayude aquí en este pueblo.
En el centro de la Florida, María del Pilar Ortiz, Univisión.
Danielle, now a hurricane, Earl, a tropical storm, and there goes Charley into the northeast. So we'll break each one of them down and see which one we really need to pay attention to. As of 8 a.m., we'll get another advisory on Charley, likely the last one, essentially saying that it's no longer a tropical system coming up, but it has put down some rain. 35-mile-per-hour winds in parts of Manhattan. Just doesn't seem right to have a tropical storm right off of Boston, does it? But anywhere along the eastern seaboard certainly has to take that into account this time of year. Now here we go, about 1,500 miles away from South Florida, crossing over the Lesser Antilles, is Tropical Storm Earl. This is the one that gets our focus now as it's moving into the Caribbean and certainly shows signs of strengthening over the next couple of days. Winds are at 45 miles per hour with this one right now, but moving very quickly, as we've seen the last couple of storms do, and also as we saw Charley do, moving out into the Caribbean through this week. And in fact, tomorrow and on into Tuesday, we could see this somewhere around the Jamaica area, and then moving primarily right now. This cone, or this likelihood of where we'd see the center of the storm, would be south of Cuba, but then through the end of the week, included in this area also is the Lower Keys, and this is really far in advance, but just to let you know that this is the area that's still going to have to be watching this very closely through the end of the week, and that includes us in Southeast Florida. As this continues moving, that we'd want to make sure how far west this system goes before it starts taking a turn to the north, which it looks like it will. 14.2, 31.6. It may not even be on your tracking map. It's so far out there, thankfully, and we expect to see Hurricane Danielle take a northerly turn early in this forecast period, and that would make it not an issue for anybody. Are you telling me to wrap? Because I'm not hearing it. 91
downgraded to a tropical depression. Winds are now down to 35 miles an hour. It is moving to the northeast at 29 miles an hour. And currently, right now, just to the east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where it's dissipating. Also watching other systems out in the tropics. This one is Tropical Storm Earl, and this is making its way for the islands and then eventually expected to move through the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. Moving quickly to the west at 25 miles an hour.
Bueno, y para saber qué pasa en el Caribe, vamos a pasar con Leticia Hernández en unos minutos, pero antes
Más de 10.000 millones de dólares es el saldo preliminar del huracán Charley. A su paso por la Florida, el presidente Bush asegura que la ayuda federal ya viene en camino. Y hay más datos al respecto y los tiene nuestro colega Jorge Viera. Adelante, Jorge.
Bueno, hay que agregar algo que me parece sumamente importante en lo que restablecemos el contacto con Jorge Viera, que en el Caribe hasta esta mañana había una tormenta tropical que aparentemente se ha degenerado en onda tropical. Y eso es fundamentalmente una buena noticia para todos nosotros, ¿no es así, Leticia Hernández?
Definitivamente es tremenda noticia por el momento, señores. Ahí observen a lo que en estos momentos no es más que una onda tropical, y fue en su momento la tormenta tropical Earl. En estos momentos se mantiene hacia el centro del Mar Caribe. Un avión caza huracanes de la Reserva estadounidense acaba de informar que en estos momentos no han encontrado un centro de circulación en este sistema. Se está desplazando, sin embargo, rumbo oeste-noroeste a razón de 25 millas por hora. ¿Qué quiere decir esto, señores? ¿Que nos podemos olvidar de este sistema tropical? No. Los modelos computarizados están diciendo que en las próximas horas, por lo menos en los próximos días, este sistema, una vez alcance ya mar más caliente, o sea, hacia lo que es adentro del Mar Caribe, pudiera una vez más regenerarse como un sistema tropical mucho más fuerte, y entonces hay que continuarlo vigilando. Así que, por supuesto, aquí...
¿Qué tal, Leti? Muchas gracias. Precisamente los principales periódicos de la zona comienzan sus titulares diciendo necesitamos ayuda. Y es mucha la ayuda que se necesita aquí. Aquí mi camarógrafo le está mostrando parte de las imágenes de destrucción que se están viendo por todo lo largo de esta zona. El trabajo es arduo, también la situación se ha convertido en un verdadero caos para buscar las necesidades básicas como gasolina, agua y otras. Las cosas que eran las más sencillas para hacer en Punta Gorda se han convertido en un verdadero dolor de cabeza. La ley de la sobrevivencia comienza a imperar. En las pocas gasolineras que están abiertas, las filas son interminables. La gente echa gasolina no solo a sus vehículos, sino también a tanques para utilizarlos en sus generadores. Algunos, como esta mujer, desean nunca haberse mudado a este lugar.
Yo deseo que no estuviera aquí en Florida. Me acabo de mudar de Massachusetts. Este es mi segundo mes aquí. Quisiera irme para Massachusetts otra vez.
¿Qué le ha pasado?
Perdí mi casa y ahora estamos en una shelter ahorita.
En algunos sectores está llegando la electricidad y el teléfono, pero todavía hay casi 1 millón de personas sin servicios básicos. La ayuda aquí está viniendo de todas partes.
Venimos a remover un poco los escombros que hay. Trabajo para una compañía de la Skippy.
Hay mucho trabajo que hacer, ¿verdad?
Bastante.
Devastating hurricane, and while help is on the way, residents are still trying to come to grips with the loss of life and livelihood. Good afternoon again. School children should be in class. Adults should be at work today.
But because so many homes and businesses were wiped out by Hurricane Charley, the new job facing everybody on Florida's West Coast, working together to rebuild their communities. Team 7 coverage begins with 7's Rosh Lowe, live in Punta Gorda. Rosh?
And we are going to share with you just an incredible scene today in the middle of town. We stopped there at what once was a gas station, and there were people lining up for food and water. And what's incredible now about this story is that people have not seen sometimes their relatives in days, and just grateful to see them, grateful they're alive.
Different supplies, just please grab what you need. Water's on my left. Cookies.
They are boxes upon boxes of food and water. They are people who have lost everything.
It looks like a war zone through here. It looks like a war zone.
Is this her daughter?
This is her 5-year-old daughter. I don't know, it's hard to explain.
A 5-year-old child without a home, and in the midst of despair, there is a cry of joy.
You're alive. Yeah. You're alive. You made it through. Oh my God, you're alive. Oh my God. How you doing? Okay. Oh.
You see now, days removed from the hurricane, Beth Tokarski here, in personal pain, sees a coworker for the first time since Charley hit, and she is just overcome, grateful she's here.
Oh my God.
And this is really the human face of the storm. Humanitarian efforts, giving people basic necessities they haven't had for days, such as water, ice, and food. And you can see the amount of people that have come out here today. This is Tamiami Trail in the center of Punta Gorda. Now that the storm has ended, the humanitarian relief begins.
You must get in line over there. Yes. You absolutely must.
The stories of these people coming through, just rip your heart out.
It feels so good to see a familiar face, to know that one of your friends is alive.
Just heartbreaking stories there, but very inspirational stories as well, because through the pain, as you saw with that one woman, she was able to smile just simply seeing a coworker. Now, the Red Cross very heavily involved in this area, trying to help out with the basic necessities, food and water and ice in certain circumstances. And this is the largest effort by the Red Cross since September 11th. We are live in Punta Gorda. Rosh Lowe, 7 News.
So great to see so many people reaching out. Rosh, thank you. Well, a number of storm victims trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, looking for comfort and solace at local churches.
7's Dave Cartoonan is standing by live for us with more on that angle.
Frustration starting to set in now as people and traffic return, but vital services remain scarce.
Pictures not seen until now, boat after boat piling up in Charlotte Harbor, revealing the power of the storm.
In South Florida, helping out as donations continue to pour in, truckloads of relief supplies shipping out. It's our top story tonight, the catastrophe on the coast. The pressure of losing everything nearly too much for some victims. Good evening, I'm Craig Stevens.
I'm Belkis Narayan. Tonight, Florida's governor is pleading with the public to be patient during the tedious recovery effort. Our live night-team coverage begins in Punta Gorda, and 7's Dave Cartoonan. Dave?
Belkis, Florida's governor is pleading, and a whole host of officials at every level are pleading. They're saying the physical toll is bad enough. 20 people dead across the state, $20 billion in damages. They're pleading with people, don't give in to the emotional toll. The discovery that some facilities are working in Charlotte County have come in some strange ways. This shopping center ravaged by Charley now has water more than 100 hours after landfall. You wouldn't have known it if it weren't for the fire sprinklers. Charlotte County also got a sprinkle of rain. Mercifully spared any downpours, however, which would have only added to the spectrum of emotions people are now coping with in Charley's aftermath. There is impatience. People are getting out more on roads with no signals, leading to heavy traffic to just about everywhere. There is restlessness. Day after day of cleanup with no tangible results is beginning to fray nerves.
Keep working and you cry a lot.
We have to, Grandma.
And there is frustration. The lines for handouts are getting longer when really people only want to tend for themselves.
You just don't know where to start. We've only seen things like this on the news in the past. Now we're the news.
Add to that the treacherous triple-digit heat indexes, and the collective psyche is only more fragile.
There's going to be a lot of frustration as we get toward the end of the line.
Well aware of the emotional toll now taking effect, 2 cabinet secretaries came here Tuesday trying to stay engaged. They say power could lift people out of their emotional ruts, but still a whole 500,000 in Florida are without it. They say power could also speed up cleanup and restoration. But even cabinet secretaries are only human. They can't restore power on their own. So instead they called to the power of the human spirit.
Sometimes I think that America's best qualities as a country surface when we're asked to respond to a tragedy. And clearly this is just another example.
And for the first time, officials are estimating when power will be returned to the hardest hit areas. They say that in 1 week's time, on August 24th, full power should be restored. Good news considering that the projections had it going off for several weeks. Tonight, with 500,000 people out of power in affected areas, that represents nearly 3/4 of victims of power outages now restored.
That's the latest live in Punta Gorda. Dave Cartoonin, 7 News 19.
We're also tracking a new tropical depression. Gina Cancelleri is here now with our first look at weather. Gina?
Well, let's look into the tropics, see what's happening here. We're looking way, way out. Here are the Cape Verde Islands. Here's the coast of Africa, and we're focusing our attention right here. What this is tropical depression number 6. A closer look at the storm does show that there were some pretty big convections associated with it, pretty big thunderstorms associated earlier. That was earlier this morning. Then as we put this loop into motion this afternoon, sort of breaking apart a little bit. It is still a tropical depression, may in fact become a tropical storm. As of 11 o'clock this morning, 11.4 north, 39.1 west, with winds barely holding on there. But as we head through the afternoon, you better believe we are expecting this thing to become a tropical storm, indicated by the green that you see here on our key shows tropical storm status. Then eventually, as this thing continues to move off to the north and northwest, it will become a Category 1 hurricane if this forecast track holds together. Notice here are the islands, though, South Florida way off the map, nothing to worry about really. What we should worry about, though, that's our forecast for today. I'll show you that coming up in a little bit. Diane.
Gina, thanks. In Fort Pierce, the man accused.
Hoy en Pembroke Pines, una lluvia cerrada cayó sobre esa área causando diversos estragos. Flamingo y la State Road 84 estuvieron sin electricidad.
Y el mal tiempo golpeó directamente a una casa de Plantation, cuyo techo fue alcanzado hoy por un rayo. El propietario de la vivienda escuchó un sonido como de estallido y notó que había sido en su tejado. La descarga eléctrica hizo saltar algunas tejas y abrió un agujero de 1 pie de diámetro, llegando hasta el ático, pero no provocó ningún incendio. Y por añadidura a todo este mal tiempo local, ya tenemos una nueva tormenta tropical rondando por ahí, cuyo nombre es Francis. Para saber qué se espera que haga en las próximas horas, hacia dónde se dirigiría, vamos con nuestro meteorólogo Joe Morales.
Gracias, María. Bueno, es la 6ª tormenta tropical de esta temporada ciclónica y está lejísimos, está a mitad de camino entre África y las Antillas Menores. Por el momento no representa amenaza a ninguna zona poblada. El Centro Nacional de Huracanes dice que ni siquiera tocaría las islas de las Antillas, pero vale la pena observarla y por el momento tenemos latitud y longitud ahí en pantalla por si la está siguiendo. Esa posición, por cierto, 1.300 y pico de millas al este de las Antillas, sus vientos máximos de solo 40 millas por hora porque apenas está en esta etapa formativa en estos momentos. Obviamente este sistema no está muy bien estructurado. Un poco de referencia, ¿no? Si ve la costa aquí, la costa nordeste de Sudamérica, ahí está Frances, mientras va estructurándose un poco, moviéndose hacia el oeste durante los próximos días, porque va a estar hacia el oeste por lo menos 24 horas, luego va a girar un poco hacia el noroeste. El lunes, si acaso, estaría al nordeste de las Antillas Menores, pasando a gran distancia de esas islas. ¿Qué suceda después de eso? Hay que ver, pero por el momento sencillamente estaremos vigilándola. Me parece que tenemos mucho tiempo de aquí a la semana que viene para estar vigilando el progreso de este sistema y para que tenga alguna perspectiva. Como ven, está como a 3.000 millas, 2.500 millas de distancia de Miami a lo que es la tormenta Frances. Más del tiempo local en mi segmento más adelante. Aquí está Félix.
Areas of West Florida, but that's still not the case in Cuba. The Cuban government says it'll cost more than $1 billion to repair the damage Charley left behind, and there's simply no time frame for restoring power. Here at home today,
to the Atlantic, here the Lesser Antilles. This is tropical storm with 70-mile-per-hour winds, so nearly there. Tropical storm Francis moving to the west-northwest at 17. We see that general motion through the day tomorrow as well, but look how slow, how little it's supposed to really move between tomorrow and Sunday. That's when things slow down and when or if it could take a pivotal turn, even a little more to the north, riding around an area of high pressure or pushing further off to the west. Now, this goes out to Tuesday, so again, we have many days to watch this, but you can see from the risk area itself, which is a very broad area, everywhere from the northern part of the Caribbean on to the east coast of the U.S., has to watch this one. 91, sun and steam, just a few.
France is gaining power across the Atlantic, and tonight it is a hurricane that should be taken seriously. Good evening, everyone. It's still too early to tell exactly what direction Francis will take.
But as it makes its move to the west, the storm station is watching its every move, and Chief Meteorologist Bill Kamal is live with the very latest now. Bill?
We're not talking about an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane, 13.7, 46.4 as of 5 o'clock, moving west-northwest at 16, so down 1 mile per hour in the forward motion. Pressure has really dropped. This could be going under a rapid intensification process right now, and it is forecast to take that northwest jog, then back to the northwest or west-northwest, even westerly in time. But keep in mind, this is a huge cone of forecast error anywhere from the Caribbean into the Atlantic Ocean by Tuesday, and still at that point well away from the United States. I want to show you another picture here, a 7 storm scan, and we'll take it as far as the forecast track. Here it is, that northwest jog, then more to the west-northwest. It is forecast to become a major hurricane Saturday afternoon, a Category 3, and even intensify further. Now, if this forecast point was correct, it would miss the Lesser Antilles. But again, the cone is this wide margin of error that encompasses anywhere from the Caribbean Sea into the Atlantic Ocean. Don't concentrate just on that forecast point, but it's something we'll have to watch, obviously, very closely. And again, not for this week. And here is the storm system way out in the Atlantic, moving to the west right now, west-northwest at 16. An eye looks like it's trying to become visible, and it could, again, be undergoing a rapid intensification process.
The season is now a hurricane.
Chief Meteorologist Roland Stedham joins us now here in our studio with the very latest. Roland.
Tony and Jackie, Tropical Storm Francis upgraded to hurricane status at 5 o'clock this afternoon from the National Hurricane Center. The system is still way out there in the Atlantic Ocean, approximately 2,500 miles away. Here we are in the state of Florida, and way down here to the southeast is where we find Hurricane Francis. Sustained winds are up to 80 miles per hour. The exact coordinates, 13.7 degrees north, 46.4 degrees west, or about 1,005 miles to the east of the islands of the Lesser Antilles, moving still rather quickly off toward the west-northwest at about 16 miles per hour. On the satellite imagery, we were able to see on the visible satellite almost an eye that was trying to form. It has well-established banding features, good outflow in all levels of the atmosphere, indicative of an environment that is conducive for further intensification. And this is the forecast track from the Hurricane Center. A Category 1 right now, forecast to reach Category 2 status probably tomorrow. And as we get into the weekend, forecast to become a major storm. Notice the jog west-northwest, and then by Saturday, Sunday, it starts turning more toward the west. And while that looks like the United States may be within the firing range of this system as we get into Monday, the truth of the matter is that there's going to be a trough that's going to dip down into the southeastern United States. Will the trough be strong enough to begin to influence the system and start turning it off more toward the north? Or will the trough just kind of be weak and the hurricane be steered by high pressure off toward the north and to the west, causing it to keep more of a westerly track? Remains to be seen. Again, as I have been saying, I will continue to say, by Monday, we should have a better idea as to whether or not this system is going to be posing any kind of a threat to the U.S. The primary concern right now is for the northeastern islands of the Caribbean. I'll have more on that, plus our weather has actually been very nice around South Florida. More of the 6-day forecast coming up.
Here, that's where it's going to be tomorrow, as a Category 1. Now look, Category 2, Category 3 hurricane on the Safford-Simpson scale already by Sunday. By Monday and Tuesday, it is moving a little bit more to the west here. The reason for that is because of high pressure, which will be building into the north of it and steering it in a more westerly direction. Now, please do not extrapolate beyond this point. The way it is right now, this is very, very iffy out here. But I just want to let you be aware that this storm is going to kind of curve in a direction that's going to be a little frightening for us as a major hurricane. So we'll just...
La ley meteorólogo Felipe Ferro, ¿hay motivos para preocuparnos o todavía?
Por el momento no está muy lejos, precisamente en estas imágenes de satélite se puede apreciar que aquí tenemos a Cuba, República Dominicana, Puerto Rico y a unas 800 millas más o menos hacia el este de las Antillas Menores se encuentra el huracán Francis, ahora categoría 2 en la escala Safford-Simpson, soplando con vientos de 105 millas por hora y se está desplazando hacia el oeste-noroeste a razón de 10 millas por hora. Aquí en las últimas imágenes de satélite se puede observar el ojo o el centro del huracán. Las bandas de alimentación prometen intensificarse aún más. En solo momentos les voy a explicar cómo.
Right off the top, all eyes on Hurricane Francis swirling west this noon and definitely getting stronger. Good afternoon. It is now a Category 2 storm.
And it's packing winds of more than 100 miles an hour. We want to introduce you now to the newest member of our 7 weather team, Alita Laresca. And Alita, what a way to start tracking a Category 2 hurricane.
Indeed it is. Thank you, Diane and Richard. Very nice, warm welcome. Good afternoon, South Florida. Taking a look at the tropics right now, you can see this is Hurricane Francis right here. Category 2 storm now upgraded just before 11 o'clock this morning. You can see counterclockwise rotation. Notice in the reds and the golds, packing winds up to more than 100 miles per hour. Let's take a look at the latest category, or rather the latest coordinates from the Hurricane Center. You can see 15 degrees north, 49 degrees west, packing winds up 105 miles per hour. Again, these are sustained. West-northwest is the movement at 10 miles per hour. Again, this storm, it is going to take a while before we can understand where the storm is going to hit. You can see the Lesser Antilles a little over 800 miles away from the Lesser Antilles. By Wednesday, forecast track is calling for Category 3 hurricane. We'll keep you posted, let you know when and
best we can put together with all the information. What the information is also telling us is that through the middle of next week, we still see reason for it to move in a more westerly direction. So Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, of course Cuba, the Bahamas, all these areas watching this especially close to the middle of next week, and then that would also include us and the eastern seaboard. So that's the latest stats on that.
Station. This is 7 News at 5.
Tonight, Francis getting even stronger. The hurricane now a powerful Category 3 storm. Good evening, everybody. The 6th storm of the season continuing its trek across the Atlantic.
And the 7th system is now developing. Chief Meteorologist Bill Kamal will have all the details for us. Bill?
And here we go, then. We are looking at the world view here, and there is a new tropical depression off the southeast coast. We talked about this all week, the tail end of that front. But here is Major Hurricane Francis in the Atlantic, and here is TD7 now that just formed as of 5 o'clock. The coordinates on Francis now a major hurricane, Category 3. This is the 3rd major hurricane this season, and that was Dr. Gray's forecast for the entire season. 3 major systems, and we've already had 3, and this is only August the 27th, I think. Don't quote me on that. This is moving toward the west-northwest, and then it should move more toward the west in time, but still be somewhere either in the Caribbean or in the open Atlantic by the middle of next week. It's something all of the greater Antilles, the northern Caribbean, and all of the east coast of the U.S., especially the southeast coast, is going to have to watch this closely. 15.7, 49.8, moving northwest at 11. TD7 is pretty stationary. It could become Gustav before it makes landfall somewhere in the Carolina coast. 3 to 5 inch rains and then heading up to the north and east. Here's 7 storm scan for you, and this Hurricane Francis is forecast to become a major Category 4 hurricane over the weekend. But again, don't fixate on this point. The cone has a large margin of error, and we're talking about the Caribbean or the open Atlantic. And here's the satellite picture of Francis as it moves toward the northwest now at 11 miles an hour. Very symmetrical and a strong, powerful system. The outflow is excellent in all quadrants. The sea surface temps are warm. This could get stronger in time.
Western suburbs and then moving off to the west in the evening hours. So beach and boating from Palm Beaches all the way down to Key West should be pretty nice here in South Florida tomorrow. And then by Sunday, tropical depression number 7 could expand a little bit, and maybe some more moisture affects South Florida on Sunday. I'm not going to call Sunday a washout, but I'd say just a little better chance of some showers and storms. By the way, tropical depression number 7 poses no threat to the state of Florida. Almost all the forecast models in agreement that this system is going to be heading off toward the north, affecting the Carolinas, and it is not expected to intensify a whole lot because of its interaction with land, but it is forecast to become tropical storm Gaston. 2,100 miles southeast of us is where we find Hurricane Francis. It's still about 800 miles east of the islands. Right now, it is high pressure that's steering it, but trying to figure out where this system is going to be, you have to look at what's happening ahead of it. And right now, there's an area of low pressure spinning around here, which is causing Francis to just kind of move off toward the north. But this low is going to go away. High pressure is expected to rebuild, and as a result, the hurricane is expected to turn more toward the west-northwest in the days to come. So there's the high right now. And also, we were hoping that this trough is going to be in place along the eastern seaboard of the United States as we get into the first part of next week. But the forecast models all saying that the trough is going to lift. High pressure is going to be rebuilding around the eastern half of the country. If high pressure rebuilds, Francis will not be able to go to the north. The clockwise circulation of air around that high would continue to drive Francis in a westerly direction, so that 4 to 5 days from now, the hurricane is forecast to be a major storm somewhere within this general vicinity. If it's actually here 4 to 5 days from now, then it could begin to pose a threat to the state of Florida. But right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the weekend. Should be pretty nice. We'll have more news coming up. Here's a look at your trip.
¿Qué tal? Buenas noches. El huracán Frances continúa intensificándose y aunque está muy lejos, mucho se pregunta qué significa esto para el sur de la Florida.
Nuestro meteorólogo John Morales nos acompaña, lo está observando y va a decirnos ahora hacia dónde se traslada, a qué velocidad. John, ¿podemos esperarlo por aquí?
Bueno, es muy temprano para decir si lo podemos esperar por aquí o no, pero definitivamente está en un lugar que preocupa. Preocupa a la Florida, preocupa a toda la costa este de los Estados Unidos en realidad, porque aunque se ha estado moviendo hacia el noroeste, y aquí lo ven mientras se va formando ese ojo del ciclón mucho más definido esta noche, por eso es que lo hemos visto intensificarse durante el día de hoy y se ha convertido en aún otro huracán de mayor intensidad, categoría 3 actualmente, vientos de 115 millas por hora. Pues lo ven como se ha estado moviendo hacia el noroeste. Las últimas dos imágenes más o menos en esta secuencia indican ya que comienza nuevamente a girar hacia el oeste. O sea, en vez de seguir subiendo y dar la vuelta hacia el nordeste, debe hacer así, o sea, virar a la izquierda, virar hacia el oeste, y ahí es que surge la preocupación para el área local. Más de esa trayectoria proyectada en breve. Por el momento, la información de los vientos, 115 millas por hora, la presión bajando. Anoche estaba en 980 milibaras, esta noche 962. Baja la presión, sube el viento, latitud y longitud. Por cierto, está como a 1.850 millas de Miami actualmente y como a 900 millas del área de San Juan, Puerto Rico. Se mueve hacia el noroeste actualmente a 12 millas por hora, pero recuerden, ya empieza a girar hacia el oeste. Y esta es la trayectoria pronosticada por el Centro Nacional de Huracanes. Ya ven por qué hay algo de preocupación aquí en la Florida y también a lo largo de la costa este de los Estados Unidos. Ahora recuerden, no se enfoquen en lo que es la proyección del centro del vórtice, digamos, que está proyectando el Centro Nacional de Huracanes. O sea, usted lo que tiene que pensar es que siempre hay errores en este pronóstico. No siempre podemos estar seguros que va a estar justo en estos puntos que ven ahí. Sencillamente pudiera estar o cerca de República Dominicana o mar afuera al sur de las Bermudas de aquí al miércoles. Pero obviamente, pues, estando en ese lugar, nos preocuparía entonces a dónde pudiera dirigirse desde ese momento en adelante. Lo que le ha estado ayudando a subir un poco ha sido esta zona de baja presión en las capas altas de la atmósfera. Eso ha permitido que se mueva hacia el norte, pero detrás de esa baja, que ya se va a estar retirando, hay un sistema de alta presión y esa es precisamente la preocupación, que el sistema de alta presión entonces la dirija hacia la costa este de los Estados Unidos y termine en algún lugar.
And we are going to deliver. First of all, let's focus in on this thing right here. What is that, you might ask? That is Tropical Depression number 7. Clearly getting better organized, and it looks like it's just on the verge of becoming Tropical Storm Gaston, and that will head slowly to the north over the next 24 to 36 hours, possibly coming in across South or North Carolina. What that will mean for us is a southerly flow beneath it, which will give us a couple of extra thunderstorms in the afternoon. Now, this is Hurricane Frances, a well-developed eye there. The next advisory from the Hurricane Center comes in about 11 o'clock this morning, but it's probably close to a Category 4 right now. What I can tell you is that it's heading off to the northwest at 12 with winds of 115 miles an hour. The nearest landmass would be the Leeward Islands. It's about 695 miles to the east of the Leewards. What is steering it along is high pressure for the moment, pulling it up to the north. Now, there is expected to be a trough left over from Tropical Depression number 7, but that trough is expected to lift out to the north. That's just one of many possible scenarios, so we're really not sure exactly by days 3, 4, and 5 where this is going to go, but we're leaning toward a more westerly track because computer models are suggesting very strongly the high pressure will re-strengthen off the Atlantic coast. If that happens, it'll bend back more to the left, and in the 4 to 5 day time frame, the threat would be anywhere from the Bahamas down toward Hispaniola. That's about 1,000 miles.
Florida, located right there. There is now Tropical Storm Gaston, and tropical storm warnings have gone up for the South Carolina coast. And here is Frances, located well to our east-southeast. Close up on Frances through the morning, and you can see it has become a lot larger and a lot more organized looking. In fact, the National Hurricane Center has now upgraded the wind speeds on Frances to 120 miles an hour. So the 11 o'clock advisory, 17.4 north, 51.9 west, winds now at 120 miles an hour, moving to the northwest at 9, 740 miles east of the northern Leeward Islands. The new future track, similar to the old future track, but showing that the big issue is going to be when this turn from that northwest motion to more of a westerly motion takes place. Obviously, if the turn takes place sooner, this is going to be an issue to the northern Leeward Islands. possibly the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. If the turn takes place a little bit later, that would take it north of the islands, but this is going to be a big issue for the folks down there. And beyond that, the future track continues to show somewhere in this area on Thursday. Obviously, the farthest south track, bad news for the Greater Antilles, and the farthest north track would be the best news in this scenario, but we'll watch it closely. Our forecast for today calling for strong summer.
Live from the news station, this is 7 News at 5.
Your storm station tracking double tropical trouble. Hurricane Francis getting stronger, just upgraded to a Category 4. And we now have a newly formed tropical storm, Gaston. And that's not all. Good evening. Parts of South Florida are now under an urban flood advisory as well.
That's right. There's a lot to talk about weather-wise. Let's send things over to meteorologist Tom Johnson for all the details. Tom?
All right, Richard and Sharon, let's start with the big news. It is Hurricane Francis out in the Atlantic, and this is a powerhouse storm, still well over 1,800 miles from South Florida, still to the east of the Lesser Antilles, specifically the Leeward Islands through here. And you can see that it's well organized. It has a well-defined eye. And as of last check, winds are sustained now at 135 miles an hour. That makes it a Category 4, and it's the second Category 4. Now, the difference is Alex pretty much brushed the Carolinas and then moved well off into the North Atlantic. This one is still south of our latitude and off to our east. So it's something to watch. And when you look at the projections, the things that can steer this system, it looks as if right now that the system will continue to move northwest and then shift to the west. So let me step out of the way. This is the state of Florida right here. These are the Greater Antilles, Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and then the Lesser Antilles here. And again, this is Francis looking very impressive on the tropical Atlantic satellite. Let's show you the coordinates right now. 17.9 north, 52.6 west, and it is moving to the northwest at 9. Pressure's awfully low, and continued strengthening is possible as the upper level winds are favorable for more development. High pressure's off to our east, okay? And circulation around high pressure is clockwise, and that brings an easterly flow on the southern flank of high pressure. This is the steering mechanism. It's a strong, powerful force, this area of high pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So what it's expected to do is kind of shunt the storm in the coming day or so. It looks like tomorrow is the time frame for this to happen. It'll shunt the storm more to the west, and obviously we need to watch this storm because the projections are, if you follow the core of the forecast fan, the projections are to move it through the Northeast Caribbean and specifically, at least potentially, into the Bahamas. In fact, as we head into days 5 and 6, we are talking about the central Bahamas. This is a forecast. This could change. We saw the variability that was associated with Charley. Certainly with this powerhouse storm, we could see more of the same. In fact, with high pressure here and high pressure over here, we could see more of a weakness through here. And often these systems look for a weakness in the atmosphere. And if that happens, that'll really help us out by turning the system to the north. I think the critical time will be Tuesday and into Wednesday as the system gears up and heads into the Northeast Caribbean. But this is the situation as of right now. I'll have more details.
Right now, Francis is a strong Category 4 hurricane. Let's get right out to a very busy meteorologist, Brian Norcross. He's live in weather control. Brian?
All right, as you know, Eliana, we get a new advisory from the National Hurricane Center every 6 hours. We have the new 5 o'clock advisory in, and just let me prepare you, there is no good news in this for our state. Now, I'm not at all focusing on South Florida because it's just too early to say, but certainly this hurricane looks like it's going to come this direction. It looks like it's going to be an extremely strong hurricane, and it looks like the next few days are going to be nerve-wracking at best. All right, let's get to the satellite picture here and take a look at what we have. And there you see an extremely well-developed hurricane, a just about perfect eye there, and we see the movement generally to the northwest with maybe a little curve on off a little bit to a more in a west-northwesterly direction toward the end. That's the big question mark. dark when and if it's going to curve. This line right here is at 20 degrees north. Now, the computer programs that forecast these things that tend to want to bring the storm closer to us tend to want to turn it and keep it for a longer way south of 20 degrees. The ones that take it a little further north tend to want to get it up north of 20 degrees. So we're going to watch here through the night tonight and into tomorrow when it makes the turn and see if it comes south of 20 degrees. And also, of course, that would bring it closer over here to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and the northern Leeward Islands. And tropical storm watches may be issued for there as soon as tonight. Now, the close-up shot here where we can see the eye develop just magnificently today, magnificent in the sense of a meteorological event. It's about as good looking a hurricane as you're ever going to see. It's symmetric. It's got bands going out here in all directions. A very, very strong hurricane, now of Category 4 strength. Here's where the computer analyzes the thunderstorms, and there you can see the purple is wrapping all the way around. If you were watching last night, it had kind of broken up as the eye went through a cycle, which they all do, but right now, this is just a very, very strong hurricane. Here are the numbers as of 5 o'clock, 17.9 and 52.6, 135 mile-an-hour winds, now a Category 4 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale, but hurricane hunters have not gone out there yet to check it out. It's just getting close enough now they're going to be able to, and then we'll have a real read on what the strength is. Right now it's just estimates from the satellite. And moving slowly at this point, northwest, generally northwest at only 9, but the thinking is that it'll pick up once it gets in here and then really pick up later on. I'll show you why. The pressure estimated at 948 millibars by the National Hurricane Center, 680 miles east of the northern Leeward Islands. That puts it just over 1,800 miles from South Florida. All right, now here is the future track. As we go through tomorrow afternoon, Monday afternoon, and Tuesday afternoon, we see that it has everything to do with how hard it turns here. If it stays on the southern track, it's going to threaten the islands here, or if it takes a more northerly track, it's going to be well enough away that they're only going to have a minimal effect, high surf and a few gusty winds. But in any case, by Tuesday afternoon, the storm is forecast to be somewhere within that circle, essentially north of Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, depending on how fast it moves. Then we get into the difficult time period here, because this is when we're going to just question what's going to happen, because through Thursday, it could be as far as somewhere here in our vicinity, or it could be back here just approaching the Bahamas, depending on how fast it gets going. And obviously there are a lot of possibilities here. One possibility is it comes south and kind of runs into Cuba. We wouldn't like that because we would be on the worst side of it here. And other possibilities are that it comes up and then it kind of takes a turn to the north before it gets to us, like Hurricane Floyd. And let me talk about why that might be the case. In other words, what I don't want you to look at here is think as that's just kind of an arrow. It's not. It's just saying that somewhere in this area the storm is expected to be in the Thursday time frame. Now, here is the weather pattern that might affect Francis. High pressure to the north right here is what has been controlling it. But there's a general area of low pressure over here that includes Tropical Storm Gaston there that developed this afternoon. And that's what's been pulling it a little bit on up to the northwest. But here is what's expected to happen over the next couple days, is that high pressure is expected to strengthen as Gaston kind of moves away to the north. The high pressure kind of fills in underneath Gaston like that. But then going a little further downstream here, down to the Thursday time frame, as the storm comes in our direction, the question is there going to be a channel of low pressure left here by Gaston that as the storm gets into our general vicinity will begin to turn it to the north? That's not at all certain. Some of the models say no, that this high is going to be further west. Some of the models say yes, there is going to be this opening here for the storm to move north. In any case, it looks like the critical day is Wednesday, when we'll see how these systems develop to our north. But in any case, it is going to be just a nerve-wracking several days as the storm is expected to even get stronger as it moves on off in our general direction. All right, I'll be back with...
Good evening. A major Category 4 hurricane named Francis is churning far out in the Atlantic tonight, but its general direction makes it a storm all of us will be keeping a very close eye on. Good evening. Chief Meteorologist Roland Stedham is here with the very latest. Roland?
Thank you, Michael. It is now located 1,800 miles southeast of South Florida, and while it poses no immediate threat to South Florida, this is certainly a hurricane that, as you mentioned just a second ago, Michael, we all need to be watching very, very carefully in the days to come. Let me show you why. Let me show you what the latest information is on Hurricane Francis. There's the hurricane. By the way, this is Tropical Storm Gaston. Just no concern. This hurricane is going to be affecting the mid-Atlantic states. Not a concern for South Florida. It is going to be a concern for the folks up there. The Hurricane Center says it could actually reach hurricane status before making landfall, but right now just a tropical storm at this point. But as we continue to look at the latest information on Hurricane Francis, sustained winds are now up to 135 miles per hour. This is almost as strong as Hurricane Charley was when it made landfall, moving to the northwest at 9 miles per hour, but that northwesterly jog is expected to turn more toward the west-northwest in the days to come, and the central pressure has now dropped to 948 millibars. Now, a little orientation. Here's Puerto Rico. Here's the northeastern islands of the Caribbean, with St. Thomas being right in there. And this is where the hurricane is right now. Nothing wrong with this hurricane. Notice how these clouds fan out and away from the center of the storm. That means that the hurricane is drawing in air at the surface. It's wrapping around this very tightly wound eye. Then the air is rising up through the eye of the hurricane and fanning out. That creates an environment that it wants to draw in more air at the surface, therefore further intensifying this hurricane as it continues to move in a general west to northwest direction over the next few days. We don't see anything at this point that is going to turn this hurricane to the north. If anything, the worst case scenario is that a strong area of high pressure is going to be building to the north. When high pressure builds on top of a hurricane, the clockwise circulation of air around that high stops the hurricane's ability from moving toward the north, and in essence it forces the hurricane to move in a westerly direction. Not only will the high pressure do that, but the high pressure also creates a perfect environment for a hurricane to remain very intense or to further intensify. Hurricane Center says this hurricane has the potential of reaching Category 5 status by the time all is said and done. And when you have a hurricane to the southeast that's coming in this general direction, you bet that South Florida better be paying close attention to what this storm is going to be doing in the days to come. So right now we have high pressure that's building on top of the hurricane. In fact, the extent of the high pressure is from the Azores all the way out to the eastern seaboard of the United States. As that high pressure builds in, again, here's the track that the Hurricane Center believes. In fact, I also want to mention that the Hurricane Center in their 5 o'clock advisory mentioned that their forecast track has so far been more accurate than all of the forecast models put together. That's not to boast. That's just to say that they're very confident in this forecast track, that the hurricane will begin to move west-northwest. Notice Category 4 status by Tuesday. Should be somewhere north of Puerto Rico. 4 to 5 days from now, the hurricane is going to be anywhere within this yellow zone that you see. If it takes a track to the north, South Florida will be in good shape. If the hurricane takes a track toward the south, we may catch some of the outer fringes. If the hurricane follows the guidance that we're getting right now, South Florida could be under the gun later next week. We're talking about late Thursday, Friday, or maybe even Saturday. Now, the Hurricane Center doesn't want us to panic, but they did mention to me that they want all of South Florida to take this opportunity, dust off the hurricane plan, make sure that you have the basic supplies that you should have had at the start of the hurricane season, to be wise, to be ready, just in case the storm comes in our general direction. I'll have more in a few minutes. Here's Michael.
Thank you, and to echo.
All right, the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center just confirming the status as of now, meaning it hasn't changed in strength. Winds still sustained at 135 miles an hour. That makes it a Category 4, but expectation is as we head through our Sunday tomorrow, we could see intensification to a Category 5. Remember, we need winds in excess of 155 for that to happen, so certainly it would have to come up in strength. It has all the ingredients to do.
That doesn't mean that where it hits, it would still be a 5, but that is possible. So I just want everybody to be ready and not be terribly surprised if that's the announcement sometime tomorrow or on Monday. All right, here is the satellite picture where we can see it relative to the islands, and we can see it in motion here over the last 12 hours. And I think you can make out a little bit, just beginning to make a little bit of a bend on off to the west-northwest. And of course, that has been the forecast all along. And how hard that storm turns to the left is going to have everything to do with how bad the weather gets here in the Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Northern Leeward Islands area. But right now, the strongest expectation is that the hurricane will go to the north. Now watch it over 24 hours. Mark it where it was a day ago. Before I do that, though, notice the eye. It's somewhat ragged there, and the purple is sort of confined to one side. All right, now watch. I'm going to mark it. Now watch as it goes through the last day. Moving to the northwest, and now toward the end, you see the turn. So watch it here as it goes. There it goes, there it goes, there it goes, there it goes. Now it's coming around over here. And there we can see that turn to the west-northwest that we have been anticipating. And look at the eye now. It's perfectly round. We can see the signs of purple all the way around it. And it's quite large. So the thinking is, if it's 135 miles per hour now, which is what the latest advisory says, and it's a large eye, as the eye shrinks, likely tomorrow, it will pick up speed just like Hurricane Charley did just a few weeks ago. All right, here are the numbers as of 11 o'clock, 18.3 and 53.4, 135-mile-an-hour winds, west-northwest now at 10, so still not moving very fast. Still estimated pressure at 948 millibars, 635 miles now east of the northern Leeward Islands. Now here is the brand new future track, and there's a little bit of a wrinkle here, a little bit of a change. So here we go. This is late in the day, like in the evening hours of Tuesday. The hurricane is expected to be north of Puerto Rico, more or less, perhaps quite far north, perhaps quite close, and possibly some sort of watches will be necessary for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, depending on how close it looks like the storm is going to get. But many of the future tracks up in here and up in here, the possible tracks, would keep it far enough away. Now, on to the future beyond Tuesday, Wednesday, and through Thursday. If you were watching earlier, you noticed that the cone reached South Florida, and now it does not. An indication that the National Hurricane Center is thinking that the storm is going to slow down and not move quite as quickly through this area here, whatever direction it's going at that time. That's all that means, is that the new computer models are indicating a little bit slower speed. But still, the thinking is that in the Thursday time frame, the storm is located in the general area of the Bahamas. Now, that doesn't say if the storm is here, for example, that it's coming toward us. It could be there and moving to the north at that time, because as you'll see in a moment, there is some possibility of a system being wanting to
produce some pockets of heavy rain because the storms don't move around a whole lot. This is Tropical Storm Gaston, sitting just off the coastline of South Carolina. It is forecast to become a hurricane. It is forecast to head toward the north. Not much of a concern for South Florida. This, of course, is Hurricane Francis. Sustained winds now 135 miles per hour. And as you look at the evolution this hurricane has taken over the last 24 hours, you're going to see what happens to a hurricane as it actually intensifies. Notice the eye is kind of lost and obscured here 24 hours ago. It was still a Category 3 storm. Now, as I put this into motion, watch. All of a sudden, the eye emerges and the hurricane begins to wrap up and tighten up its circulation. That's because the environment is very conducive, and the Hurricane Center is concerned that while this is a very powerful Category 4 hurricane, almost as powerful as Hurricane Charley was when it made landfall last week, this has the potential to reach Category 5 status. Now, does it pose a threat to South Florida? At this point, again, the hurricane is 1,800 miles away. It's too early to tell if it's going to be posing a threat to us, but when you have a hurricane southeast of us with high pressure that's building on top of it, you have to take the opportunity to stay informed with what the hurricane is going to be doing. Trough of low pressure that's along the eastern seaboard of the United States is expected to lift. High pressure is expected to rebuild. However, if the high is weak, the hurricane could actually turn more toward the north, stay east of the Bahamas, and head off toward the Carolinas. That's if this high pressure is weak. But if the high pressure is really strong, it will, in essence, suppress the hurricane to the south, not allow it to turn to the north, and keep it moving more of a westerly direction. And, of course, you could see that we would then become more of a potential threat area. So it's just too early to tell at this point. By Monday, especially as we get into Tuesday, we'll have a much better idea. But here's the official forecast track from the Hurricane Center. Tuesday, because the hurricane has slowed down a little bit, the track has all shifted back a bit. Tuesday still expected to be a Category 4, possibly Category 5 hurricane, somewhere around Puerto Rico and points north. And here we go into Wednesday and Thursday, somewhere within this general vicinity. And if it's here and it's still pointed at this general direction, then of course the Hurricane Center will have to start considering some watches and warnings. At this point, still too early for that, but just be thinking.
I'm meteorologist Bob Soper, CBS 4 Weather Control. Let's take a quick look at Francis right now, swirling down in the Atlantic, approaching the northern Leeward Islands, and there is Gaston moving onshore of the Carolinas. We're more interested, though, in Francis at this hour as he continues to swirl through the Atlantic, heading generally now due west, and the Leeward Islands are right here, the northern Leeward Islands into the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico right there. The 11 o'clock position, 18.6 north, 54.7 west. The 135-mile-per-hour winds moving west at 9. That position is 550 miles east of the northern Leeward Islands right here, and it is moving toward the west at this point. It may, if they're lucky, move just slightly to the north of the Leeward Islands during the day tomorrow, and by the morning on Tuesday, somewhere north of Puerto Rico, and on Wednesday, north of Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And then as this whole thing continues to move, well, we are in the risk area in South Florida now through Friday. Look at the big error, how possibility, though, into that long-term period, it gets more and more difficult to say exactly where something like this would go that far ahead. So we're going to keep an eye on it for you. And as a matter of fact, a new advisory and a new future track on Hurricane Francis will be out at 5 o'clock, and we'll have an update on that at that time, and we'll have updates throughout the afternoon. Meanwhile, let's get you right back out to CBS.
Well, right now, still 495 miles to the east of the Leeward Islands. Those are the northern islands of the Lesser Antilles. And officially, it's at 18.8 north, 55.6 west. And winds are sustained at 135, so it's maintaining its strength. It hasn't strengthened to a Category 5, and it hasn't lessened either in its intensity. And now the movement is directly to the west at 9 miles an hour, so it made that turn and is now headed to the west, but fairly slowly at only 9 miles an hour. Pressure holding fairly steady. Last night I saw 948. Today I'm seeing 949 as of the 5 p.m. update. Follow the forecast fan. Again, this is the big story as we head through the work week. We're going to have to watch it day in and day out, every day, every time the advisory comes out because of the room for error. All it has to do is get picked up by a weakness to the north or to the south, and it can really change its path quite a bit. But still a very powerful hurricane, and it's moving in our general direction. So that's why we have to watch it very, very closely. You can see that the core of the forecast fan, and I don't like to point it out, but I have to do it in this case, it is moving through the Bahamas as we head into Thursday and Friday, so certainly we're going to have to keep our eye on this one with this Category 4 churning through the Atlantic. I just got this off the printer, obviously, and I do want to point out that there are tropical storm watches across parts of the Leeward Islands, including St. Martin, Anguilla, Barbuda, and Antigua, and it could be extended to the British Virgin Islands later tonight. Let's take a look at that satellite, shall we? And you'll see Francis moving through the Atlantic, and I thought that perhaps it would be bumped up to a Category 5. It has a ways to go, 155 instead of 135, but the reason I thought so is because that the wind speed at 135, and this is Florida way over here, so we're watching this very large storm as it continues to feed off the warm waters of the Atlantic. Water vapor, again, indicating what I talked about with the shrinking of the eye, and certainly we could see some intensification in the next hours or days even, as the system is not experiencing any shear and the upper level winds are quite favorable. One more look, the high resolution visible satellite showing the system all by its lonesome out there. Jet stream, usually we look to the jet stream, a trough, to push these systems out. Unfortunately, that is not the case as we head through the time period. So we'll have to look for other systems to pull it to the north or to the south, and that's yet to be determined. Your full forecast coming up.
We also have Tropical Storm Hermine and Tropical Storm Gaston has made landfall over South Carolina. Let's get to the latest and show you exactly what's going on. This feature up here is Tropical Storm Gaston. Not a concern for South Florida. This is Tropical Storm Hermine. This is also expected to kind of follow in the footsteps of Gaston. And then down here, 1,600 miles southeast of South Florida, is where we find a very powerful Category 4 hurricane, and its name is Francis. Sustained winds 135 miles per hour, moving very slowly now toward the west at 9 miles per hour. The actual center is approximately 495 miles to the east of the northern Leeward Islands. The hurricane is going to continue to move toward the west. Here's the eye 24 hours ago. Watch as we put this into motion. You're going to be able to see that northwesterly movement has been stopped. The hurricane is now slowing down. The eye of the hurricane is getting smaller. This is kind of a normal fluctuation that we see, but we don't see the hurricane moving off toward the northwest. What we think it's going to continue to do, the Hurricane Center says, is continue moving in a general westward direction over the next few hours. Now, one thing that's important, that is that for the first time today, reconnaissance aircraft has deployed out of St. Croix and has been flying around the hurricane, and they've confirmed the winds that we're seeing right now. But another thing is that there's another aircraft that's going to be flying in the atmosphere ahead of Hurricane Francis, and it's going to be gathering data in the atmosphere ahead of the hurricane. That information is going to be fed into the forecast models tonight, and that is going to be giving the Hurricane Center a better idea of what this hurricane is going to be doing in the days to come. Let's talk about two different scenarios, and that is if we have a weaker area of high pressure that develops on top of the hurricane. If that weaker area of high pressure develops, the system will be allowed to go around the perimeter of the high. The hurricane in this scenario would stay east of the South Florida coastline, but it would certainly be a concern for the Bahamas. Now, let me show you what would happen in another scenario, and that is that the strong high pressure develops, and in fact, this high pressure could end up encompassing much of the eastern seaboard of the United States. If this strong and rather expansive area of high pressure develops, then the hurricane will be blocked from going toward the north, and what would happen is the hurricane would follow the perimeter of the high and come dangerously closer to South Florida and Cuba and the central Bahamas. So this would be a scenario where the hurricane would come closer. The question is, how strong is the high going to be? How far inland is that high going to go? These are more questions we have answers for right now, but I'm hoping that the reconnaissance data going into the forecast models tonight will help us have a better picture of what this hurricane is likely to do in the days to come. Category 4 right now, forecast to be a Category 4 by Tuesday just north of Puerto Rico, and it could be anywhere around the Dominican Republic and Haiti or well to the north. And what this ellipse means, this is the Hurricane Center concern as far as their margin for error. They have to, with forecasts, they have to expand that margin for error. That's why the cone gets wider with time and with distance, because they're not sure if the hurricane may actually track more in this direction or the margin for error has to also compensate and consider that the hurricane could end up going more toward the south. So far, South Florida is just a situation where we need to continue to watch. You should have those basic preparations you should have had made at the start of the hurricane season. I'll have more on this hurricane and also a little history on hurricanes coming up in the forecast in just a few minutes.
Hurricane Francis is spurring many South Floridians to pick up storm supplies all of us are urged to have throughout the hurricane season, which began June 1st and ends November 30th. Jaylene Rodriguez caught up with people catching up on their checklist. She's here now.
Well, Max Mayfield at the National Hurricane Center probably said it best when he said not to be alarmed, but prepare and be aware. And plenty of South Floridians did just that today. At a Category 4, most forecast models indicate Hurricane Francis is heading in our general direction. But landfall is still more than 5 days away, and a lot could change in that time.
Nobody can tell you if this is going to hit South Florida, the Keys, or even up on the Florida East Coast. But the message is clear. We need to be prepared.
And many South Floridians are doing just that.
I'm kind of scared because I saw what happened in Punta Gorda, Florida, and that was very sad.
If in fact it does hit, we've got everything we need.
This Home Depot in Miramar is already running out of hurricane supplies.
Flashlights we're getting short on. The water is going by the pallets. The generators are completely gone.
While plenty are stocking their shelves, others say it's too soon to panic.
I really don't worry until it's really time to go to the store and try to get some water.
I'm thinking positive thoughts. It's going to pass the spider.
This is Francis's projected path. Max Mayfield with the National Hurricane Center says we all have to look beyond this line and look at the cone of uncertainty. He says many residents on the West Coast failed to do just that when Charley was approaching.
The large cone of uncertainty that we have, out to 5 days is very, very large. And, Florida is certainly within that cone. So it just makes good sense to me to go ahead and dust off the plans and start thinking about what you might do if it continues towards us.
And some managers of Home Depots in South Florida will actually be meeting with their vendors tomorrow so they can quickly restock their shelves with plenty of hurricane supplies. Michael?
Jaylene, thank you very much. And for the latest updates.
That northerly and westerly track. It'll continue on a more northerly track, impacting places along New Jersey, Manhattan. That's going to be the concern for heavy rain. And you can see Gaston that made landfall earlier today. The latest coordinates on Hermine look like this. Again, 40-mile-an-hour sustained winds, gusts up to 52 miles per hour, and the pressure at 1,008 millibars. Again, moving off in the north and eventually easterly direction. The forecast track takes a storm well offshore of Cape Fear and Cape Hatteras, turns it off the Atlantic. It may brush again New Jersey, bringing some rainfall. The cone of air a little wide there by Tuesday at 2 in the morning. Gaston, which made landfall earlier today, brought heavy rain, a 3 to 5 foot storm surge for coastal regions of the Carolinas. You can see those rain bands working their way through parts of North Carolina. Several tornado warnings with this rain band as the storm continues to dump 6 to 10 inches of rainfall there in the Carolinas. So flooding, the main concern for Gaston. All of our attention obviously goes to Francis as it is now moving due west at around 9 to 10 miles per hour. We expect us to maintain this westerly track over the next 5 days before possibly turning north. Now, again, I say possibly because it is, again, back in, pushes Francis a little further south. But again, right now, the Hurricane Center pushing this storm further north from the lake on up to about Daytona Beach. Anywhere along the East Coast, get those hurricane preparedness plans.
This is Cuba. That is Tropical Storm Gaston making landfall over South Carolina. This is now newly formed Tropical Storm Hermine. 40-mile-an-hour winds. It, too, is expected to go off toward the north, weaken and dissipate over the next couple of days. And, of course, all eyes are on Hurricane Francis. Still a very powerful Category 4 hurricane, 135-mile-an-hour winds, and the hurricane is now starting to move very slowly toward the west at about 9 miles per hour. It should be bypassing just very, very close to the northeastern islands of the Caribbean here. And then the question is, what's going to happen in the days to come? Now, the forecast track from the Hurricane Center has the hurricane remaining as a Category 4 storm as we get into the first part of next week. Now, as you look at this, some folks have already come into the weather office and they say, well, let's just keep drawing a line and notice the hurricane's going to stay to the east of us, they say. Well, the truth is that there's a great margin of error. We're not exactly sure what the hurricane is going to be doing beyond Tuesday and Wednesday. Remember, when we had Hurricane Charley making landfall a couple of weeks ago, people were drawing a line and saying, well, obviously it's headed toward Tampa. What did the hurricane do at the last minute? It turned and made landfall over the Fort Myers, Port Charlotte area. So that's a very dangerous scenario to look at that and draw a line and say, obviously it's going to stay east of us. The uncertainty has the Hurricane Center painting this ellipse, meaning that the hurricane 4 to 5 days from now can be anywhere within this general vicinity. If it tracks more toward the south, it would be more of a concern for us. If it indeed stays more toward the north, it would be a better scenario for us. Now, let me take you back to 1999. This is the track that a very powerful hurricane called Floyd took. The hurricane was pointed pretty much at South Florida for quite some time. It, too, was doing what Francis is doing, going around the perimeter of high pressure out here in the Atlantic Ocean. At the last minute, the hurricane turned right over the Bahamas. It caused substantial damage across the north and eastern islands of the Bahamas. But the reason this hurricane turned, there was a huge trough of low pressure that came in from the northwest that created a channel where the hurricane can go up to the north. Well, we don't have that trough of low pressure this time around. All we have is high pressure, and we're going to have to wait and see just how strong that high is. That this is no longer a Category 4 hurricane. The hurricane reconnaissance aircraft found that the winds have come down just a little bit, and as a result, it is now a Category 3 storm that is still a major and a rather intense hurricane that is spinning around in the Atlantic Ocean. First of all, let me show you. Here's where Francis is. This is Tropical Storm Hermine. Not much of a concern. It's going to head off toward the north. And then we have the remnants of old Tropical Storm Gaston made landfall over South Carolina. It is also just kind of falling apart and moving off toward the north. But the hurricane still looks very impressive, and it is still moving very, very slowly now toward the west with the latest advisory just hot off the press moments ago. Sustained winds at 125 miles per hour. That is down considerably from the winds we had earlier today. Winds are, it's moving off toward the west at 8 miles per hour. The central pressure has also gone up, and if the pressure rises, that means that the wind speed decreases with a hurricane. Located at 18.9 degrees north, 56 56.2 degrees west, and the eye is now located 455 miles east of the northern Leeward Islands, Category 3 hurricane. Fascinating close-up satellite image, and what I'm going to show you, this is what the hurricane looked like 24 hours ago. Notice the very well-defined eye of the hurricane. Notice the perfect symmetry of the hurricane, as it was all the thunderstorm activity was just perfectly wrapped around the actual center of that circulation. Now, as I put this into motion, watch. Here's the hurricane now. Here's where it was earlier this morning, still moving off toward the northwest, and then all of a sudden that northern movement completely stopped and the hurricane took a turn and started heading off toward the west. Watch as I put that into motion. So you see from here to here, that is a due westerly direction, and that means that high pressure is now sitting on top of the hurricane, and the clockwise circulation of the air around that high means the hurricane can no longer go toward the north. Off to the west it has to go. Now the question is, how long is it going to continue to move toward the west? It all depends on what the high pressure to the north of the hurricane ends up doing. Some of the forecast models are saying the high is going to be rather expansive and will actually go all the way into the eastern half of the country. If that's the case, the hurricane will be suppressed down toward the south. Some of the models are now suggesting that the high is going to develop a little weakness here, and if that's the case, then the hurricane perhaps will turn before impacting the state of Florida. Let's pinpoint those two actual scenarios that we're going to be watching. First of all, the weak high, it doesn't move too far toward the west, and the perimeter of that high means that the hurricane will follow in a west-northwest direction eventually and then start turning more toward the northwest, almost like what Hurricane Floyd did back in 1999. If it follows a weak high scenario, then Francis would stay to the east of the east coast of Florida, but certainly would be a considerable concern still for the islands of the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. Now let's say that the high is strong and it goes all the way into the eastern half of the country. This would be a worst-case scenario for South Florida, because the high developing to the north, if it indeed goes way out toward the west, the hurricane would not be able to turn to the north. The high would suppress the hurricane, keep it down the south, and the hurricane would have to turn toward the west and continue moving in a westerly direction. This would be a greater concern for Cuba and also still for the Bahamas and for the southeast coast of the United States and for southeast Florida in particular. So if the high is really strong, Francis would come closer to us. We don't want to see that happen, but the bottom line is the Hurricane Center thinks it's going to continue to move in a westerly direction, eventually turn west-northwest, and then beyond Wednesday, it should be somewhere within this general vicinity. Max Mayfield at the Hurricane Center says do not focus on these points that you see here. Focus more on that probability of that error and the hurricane being somewhere in this general vicinity. So preparations, we should...
She is a Category 3 storm, no longer 4. She was downgraded today. A new wave coming off the African coast. Then we have both Hermine and Gaston. Those are not concerns for us, but Francis is a concern for us, and we do need to pay close attention. Here's the system. It got a little frayed last night. Some of the winds are just kind of flaring out now, not as together as it was yesterday, but you can see it still has a very well-defined eye and is still a major storm. Here are the latest coordinates. Hurricane Francis, 19.2 north, 59.1 west, and about 265 miles east-northeast of the northern Leeward Islands. So folks in the Leeward Islands are under a tropical storm warning. Virgin Islands under a hurricane warning. So those folks should really start to batten down the hatches and pay close attention to the system. Now you can see on the visible, very, very well-defined storm, almost textbook in nature. It looks like a buzzsaw, and it does have the chance to re-strengthen to a Category 4 storm down the road. As a matter of fact, as early as today or tomorrow, it could be a Category 4. We are still in the shaded area.
Señoras y señores, buenos días. Buenos días, Lizeth Mari. Bienvenida a casa.
Gracias.
Hay que decir que el huracán Frank se sigue desplazándose sigilosa y peligrosamente sobre las cálidas aguas del Atlántico.
Hace apenas minutos, el Centro Nacional de Huracanes emitió el boletín al respecto que el metrólogo Felipe Ferro resume. Adelante, Felipe.
Muy buenos días y muchas gracias. Efectivamente, estamos vigilando muy de cerca el progreso de este huracán. En el día de hoy, la península floridana despejada, al igual que partes del Caribe, Cuba, un día maravilloso, República Dominicana con mucho sol, al igual que Puerto Rico, pero aquí tenemos el huracán Francis. También hay más actividad hacia el norte del océano con la tormenta tropical Hermine, que yo creo que no va a amenazar a nadie. Lo que fue la tormenta tropical Gustav se está disipando y hay también dos sistemas, un sistema de altas presiones en el Atlántico, masa de aire fresco en el interior del país. Serán estos dos los que van a determinar la trayectoria del huracán Frances durante los próximos días. Aquí los últimos datos directamente desde el Centro Nacional de Huracanes. El viento ahora a 120 millas por hora se debilitó un poco durante la noche. Eso lo clasifica como categoría 3 y el centro del huracán se encuentra a unas 300 millas hacia el este-noreste de las islas de Sotavento. Ya existe una vigilancia de tormenta tropical para Puerto Rico, al igual que la isla de Vieques. Existe también una vigilancia de huracán ahora para las Islas Vírgenes y aviso de tormenta.
Now, and where that puts it in association with South Florida is about 1,500 miles to the southeast of us right here. As I mentioned, this thing continues to move off to the west, and because of that, we have tropical storm warning in effect for the northern Leeward Islands. That area you see boxed in orange. The area in yellow indicates a hurricane watch in effect for the Virgin Islands. Just issued recently as the 11 o'clock advisory in Puerto Rico, there was a tropical storm watch in effect for those areas. Watches mean that within 36 hours, you will see some tropical storm or hurricane force winds. The warning area means in 24 hours, you will see tropical storm force winds or hurricane force winds, depending upon which kind of watch or warning is issued for your particular area. Here is the warning as of 11 o'clock this morning: 19.3 north, 58.7 west, about 1,500 miles to the east-southeast of Miami right now. Wind sustained at 120 miles an hour, and this thing continues to move off to the west at 13 miles an hour. This rounded it up to about 15. Pressure right now, 956 millibars. Here's a look at the track laid out for you. Continuing to move off to the west as we head into Tuesday morning, but notice it's to the north of the islands. Continuing to move off to the west to northwest as we head into Wednesday morning, north of Hispaniola. Then the cone gets wider and wider as we head into this upcoming weekend, over the Bahamas as we head into Thursday, Friday. As of Saturday morning, the cone is really wide at this point.
As I'll show you in a second, because there's a weather system that might tend to want to push the hurricane a little bit north on Wednesday, and then late Thursday approaching the Bahamas, and if the Wednesday system does its work, perhaps even missing the Bahamas, but that's certainly open to question. And then looking on downstream into the Friday and Saturday time frame, the idea is that by Saturday afternoon it's somewhere in this large circle here. Now, here's just a little bit of good news to think positive thoughts, that most of these possible tracks in here, or anything, even if it came close in here, we're on the left side, right? If the storm is in here and it's circulating like this, we're on the left side, the so-called weaker side. We would be fearful for our friends to the north if that were to occur, but we would be here in South Florida on the weaker side on, say, 60% of the tracks. So the system would have to come down here or something like that for us to get the strongest part. Obviously, that's a possibility, but also there are a lot of possibilities for it to be up to our north. It's just too early to make that determination. Now, here are the weather features that we're going to be watching. It's high pressure to the north now, and that's what's driving it on off to the west. It's really right under a high pressure system. Now, here we go for the next 3 days, or next 2 days now, because it's Monday, up to Wednesday. Now, what's going to happen is this high is going to ridge out or just expand out, but the dip that's associated with Gaston and Hermine is going to provide a little bit of a weakness in here. Is it a significant weakness? How big is it? And might that pull the storm north a little bit? Any northward movement is certainly good for us and good for the Bahamas, and we're just going to have to see what happens on Wednesday with this dip, because then high pressure builds back over the hurricane, and we wait for another big dip coming along. It's out here in the middle of the country about Friday to weaken the end of this high and allow the storm to get north. So this is the Friday time frame. So Saturday it's over in here somewhere. And is it under the influence of this dip at least enough to get nudged to the north? That's what we're just not sure of.
Air around the perimeter of a hurricane is usually sinking. And if you have sinking air in the atmosphere, clouds have a tough time developing. But we are watching this little low in the upper levels of the atmosphere. This low spinning around may give us a few scattered showers, but for the most part, I think our weather is going to be nice. And also, these lows have a tendency sometimes of pulling these tropical systems up toward the north, although the Hurricane Center really is not talking too much about this. It just doesn't think that it's really going to be a factor in the days to come. Here's our high-resolution visible satellite on Hurricane Frances. Sustained winds at 125 miles per hour, Category 3 hurricane. Here's the island of Puerto Rico. Notice the clouds north of Frances, how fast they're moving from the east towards the west. That is high pressure that is pushing the hurricane in the atmosphere, and it's going to continue to push it in a general west to west-northwest direction. By Thursday, should be somewhere either around eastern Cuba or around the central Bahamas, or hopefully to the north of the Bahamas. The Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos are certainly going to be a concern in the days to come. 4 to 5 days from now, the hurricane could be anywhere within this general vicinity that you see here. And Hurricane Center again saying that when you're talking about a forecast track, 4 to 5 days down the road, while it looks like it's heading off to the north, they warn that they can be off by hundreds of miles.
And it is moving in a general westerly direction. It has increased now to a 125-mile-an-hour storm, a Category 3. Now, even though this is the forecast track, and these are points on the map from the National Hurricane Center, and by the way, it is forecast to become a 4 during the middle and latter part of the week, I've got to emphasize that this is a large cone encompassing a lot of the Caribbean and also up and just to the southeast of the Carolinas. So as you go out in time, obviously 300 miles or more is the margin of error here. Do not forecast on the track. This track is going to shift left and right or be tweaked all week long. Every 6 hours, like I say, it has a shelf life of just 6 hours, like milk in a hot sun. So just watch it all week long, have a plan in place, and we'll take it from there. Here's the satellite picture of Francis at this point, and it is moving westerly now at 14 miles an hour. Big area of high pressure to the north of it is steering it toward the west. It's not just one high, though. It's two highs we have to contend with, and the weakness or lack of weakness between the two highs. And then way downstream, a front or a trough coming into the western U.S. All this has to play out over the next 5 days. Here are the latest coordinates on it. And at 5 o'clock, 19.5, 60.0, moving west at 14. Again, 1360 east-southeast of South Florida. And there's that cone. We have tropical storm warnings in effect for the northern Leeward Islands, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands with the exception of St. Croix and all of Puerto Rico. Now, no warnings or watches yet for the Dominican Republic, Haiti, or Cuba, or the Turks and Caicos. That would come down the road as the storm continues to move toward the west. There is a weak front, and that front is picking up Gaston, and Gaston could actually go into the Atlantic and regenerate, in which case the Hurricane Center will reissue advisories. And there's Hermine heading toward the southeast coast of Massachusetts, but it should become extra tropical, maybe some gusty winds there. But notice in this water vapor loop, that big clockwise flow in the North Atlantic, that's a huge area of high pressure, clockwise circulation around high pressure, and that's what's steering the storm now due westerly. It's in its own environment now. It's shielded from any kind of shear at this point, and we can't see anything down the road that would prevent it from either staying intense or even getting a little bit stronger. Again, the weak trough in the east where you saw that trough that's going to push out Hermine and Gaston, that's going to lift out. And this trough coming into the western U.S. will eventually
off. So most of the models show a narrow ridge to the north of Francis, and that's what we think will keep it headed toward Florida.
All right, Max, last year Isabel was sort of a similar scary-looking storm taking a somewhat similar path. At that time, the forecast models, I remember, were very confident that there'd be a strong trough that would pick up the storm, and no such luck this time?
Yeah, I don't see how that's going to happen, Don. And also with Isabel, it was a pretty straight track coming in there perpendicular to the coastline. This one will indeed turn up more towards the northwest and eventually north with time. Exactly when it starts that turn more towards the north, it's going to be very difficult to forecast.
All right, let's talk about intensity factors. Are there more pro than con for strengthening the storm at this time?
That's right. I think that we'll likely see some fluctuations. Usually when you get well-defined eye like we have in the southern injury now, you may see some eye wall replacement cycles, and it may weaken a little bit, it may strengthen a little bit. But we need to treat this like it's going to be a major hurricane. Of course, you and I know what really counts is where they make landfall and how strong they're at landfall. And we have some limitations on that too, but at least this time we know, as opposed to Hurricane Charley that strengthened right before landfall, we already know we have a major hurricane on our hands.
All right, what about sea surface temperatures? Are they going to be getting any warmer? The environment going to be getting any more conducive to strengthening as the time goes on?
No problem at all with the sea surface temperatures as far as anything to inhibit it. There's no reason to think that will play a part. We do have this upper level low that you can see here over the Bahamas. If that were to stay there, that would probably provide some shear to Francis and also maybe turn it a little more towards the north. However, the models were handling that pretty well and pretty consistently, and moving that that upper level low westward into the Gulf of Mexico, and not letting it be a factor. The upper level environment, as you can see here, looks very well formed, and We just don't see any reason for this to weaken significantly, at least in the next couple of days. We've still got longer than that. We can always hope, but the best thing to do is go ahead and prepare.
All right, Max, thank you very much. A scary-looking storm from the surface, kind of beautiful from space. Thank you for joining us from the National Hurricane Center.
Thank you,
all right, Trent, I want to...
Atlántica de los Estados Unidos. Me parece que sí va a chocar con algún lugar en los Estados Unidos durante este próximo fin de semana, pero ¿dónde exactamente? Eso está aún por determinarse. Mientras tanto, en el caso de Puerto Rico, ahí ven el huracán moviéndose hacia el oeste esta noche. La definición del ojo del ciclón no tan buena esta noche como estaba durante horas de la tarde. Sin embargo, el Centro Nacional de Huracanes indica que los vientos se mantienen en 125 millas por hora. El rumbo del ciclón casi directo hacia el oeste pasaría tal vez a 100 millas al norte de la costa norte de Puerto Rico durante el día de mañana, donde hay aviso de tormenta tropical actualmente en vigor. Lo mismo el caso para las islitas de las Islas Vírgenes y el extremo norte de las islas de Sotavento. Claro, esto está muy lejos de los Estados Unidos todavía, más de 1000 millas de distancia de Miami, y hay muchos factores que pudieran influir en su trayectoria durante los próximos días, así que tenemos tiempo para vigilarla, pero como dije al principio de este segmento, debe en algún momento chocar con la costa este del país. La pregunta es si lo hará en algún lugar en la Florida o será más al norte hacia el área de las Carolinas. La proyección del Centro Nacional de Huracanes de la trayectoria de este sistema se las voy a presentar en un segundo, pero primero las estadísticas del sistema que estaba en 19.7 norte y 61.4 oeste. Ahora a las 11 de la noche, vientos de 125 millas por hora, la presión barométrica se mantiene baja, 945 milibaras, movimiento hacia el oeste, y ahí está esa proyección del Centro Nacional de Huracanes de hacia dónde debe moverse el sistema en los próximos días. Y como ven, es en general hacia el oeste durante las próximas 24 horas, luego girando un poquito más hacia el noroeste durante la segunda mitad de la semana laboral, de tal manera de que se acercaría a la costa este del país. Obviamente no se pueden enfocar solamente en este punto, tienen que considerar que hay
the Ragged Islands, and for the Turks and Caicos Islands. That's the area here. A hurricane warning is in effect for that area. Then a tropical storm warning has now been put in place for the northern edge of the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands continue to stay under a tropical storm warning as we head into this afternoon. Here's a look at the latest advisory as of 11 o'clock this morning, located at 20 north, 64 west. That puts it right now at 1,100 miles to the east-southeast of Miami, with winds sustained at 135 miles an hour, gusting up to 160 miles an hour. The movement is still to the west at 15 miles an hour. That has not changed. The pressure has, in fact, gone up a little bit to 950 millibars or 28.05 inches of mercury. Here's a look at the latest track, the newest track as of 11 o'clock this morning. Continuing to move to and through the Bahamas as we head through Wednesday and Thursday, Friday morning as well. Saturday morning at 8 a.m., you notice that we are in this cone right here. From the Keys all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean, the heart of the storm, the center, the core, the eye of the hurricane could be anywhere along this line. As we continue to move into Sunday morning, this thing tracks off to the north, still as a strong hurricane at this point, most likely Category 3, continuing to move off to the north. Realize that at this point you should have a plan in place as to what you will do this weekend if in fact this is the case. We will of course continue to update you on the Local 10 News at noon.
This weather alert has been sponsored by the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida.
Atlántico, aquí los últimos datos, ahora vientos de 135 millas por hora. Más temprano durante la noche estaba soplando con intensidad de 125 millas por hora. Ahora como categoría 4 en la escala Saffir-Simpson se encuentra 175 millas al noreste de San Juan. Desafortunadamente su movimiento es hacia el oeste a razón de 15 millas por hora. Aquí en las últimas imágenes de satélite se puede apreciar ese centro de circulación o el ojo donde se encuentran los vientos más intensos y las bandas de alimentación ya están afectando a Puerto Rico. La precipitación entrando desde el norte de San Juan con aguaceros. La precipitación llega hasta la cordillera central, Mayagüez con lluvia, y aquí se puede observar ya toda la precipitación asociada con el ojo. Se está moviendo hacia el oeste, se espera que se mueva un poquito más hacia el noroeste. Un poco más adelante les voy a decir.
Hurricane Francis still days away from the U.S., but the already powerful storm picking up even more speed and strength.
Concerned residents here in South Florida picking up storm supplies. Many people getting ready just in case Francis eventually comes our way. Good afternoon again. Francis, once again, Category 4 storm.
And parts of the Caribbean are about to feel the first effects. Our Live Team 7 coverage begins with 7's Elita Loresca and the latest forecast track. Elita.
Latest imagery from Hurricane Francis, you can see still making its way toward the eastern seaboard. As we take a look at this imagery, you'll notice here are the Leeward Islands. It is staying well to the north of the Leeward Islands. The core of the storm is what we're looking at now, still very well defined. The eye wall showing very strong hurricane force winds surrounding it, and the outer bands providing not only rain but also strong tropical winds. Already hurricane warnings in effect this afternoon. I will show that to you in just a bit. Let's first get a look at the coordinates. Hurricane Center showing the latest coordinates here at 20 degrees north, 64 degrees west, winds 135 miles per hour, picking up from where we were earlier this morning, upgraded from a Category 3 storm to a Category 4 storm, moving west at 14 miles per hour. Still a little over 1,100 miles away from Miami, Florida, but take a look at the forecast track now. We anticipate this storm to stay well to the north of the Dominican Republic as well as Puerto Rico, headed toward the Bahamas over the next 24 hours, looking at hurricane warnings and watches for the islands there, and then it will fall or hit anywhere between the cone, so anywhere south of Florida, headed toward the panhandle there, or even along the coast of the Carolinas. That is what we're watching, and we're focusing on this general vicinity, anywhere south of Florida or toward the mid-Atlantic coastline. Again, the warnings and watches to be concerned about if you have any loved ones living in these areas. Hurricane warnings for the southeastern islands of the Bahamas, central islands of the Bahamas, a hurricane watch. So possibility of hurricane force winds there over the next 36 hours. Tropical storm warning still in effect as well for the northernmost coastline portion.
Now live, this is a Hurricane Francis update.
And good afternoon, Brian Norcross here in Weather Control. We continue to watch the steady progress of Hurricane Francis, increasing in intensity, now up in well into Category 4 range and clearly moving to the west-northwest now, obviously in our general direction. Now, here are the latest numbers as of the 2 o'clock advisory at 20.3, 65.0. There are the winds at 140 miles an hour, moving generally west, but we know it's a little bit north of due west. It's right on track exactly as forecast. As we've been talking about the last few days, this storm, it looks like it's going to come right at us at least for a while, but I stress at least for a while, and more on that in a second. 920 miles east-southeast of Nassau right now, and this number is important because hurricane hunters recently measured 942 millibars. The lower the pressure, the lower that number, the stronger the storm, and it has gone down significantly today. Therefore, the winds have gone up. All right, here are the warnings that are in effect now. Tropical storm warnings in effect for the islands here, just because they're going to get the fringe of the hurricane. Hurricane warnings in effect for the southeastern Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, and then hurricane watches in effect for the central Bahamas. That does not include Nassau at this point, but clearly with the storm really on the march now, the watches are going to expand to include Nassau very soon and the whole northern Bahamas chain, and the hurricane warnings will expand as well because we really believe this storm is going to come very close to the Bahamas. Now here on the future track, you can see that. Here it is tomorrow, passing by to the north of Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. And then the question is, which side of this does it go on? If it goes up in here, everybody is going to get a little bit of a windstorm, but it's not going to be so bad. Obviously, if it goes down in here, that's going to be very bad for our friends in the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, and potentially all the way up the islands of the Bahamas if it stays to the left of the future track. And here in South Florida, can't help but notice that the 3-day future track, which takes us only to morning on Friday, already includes us just in the corner of it. So there is some small possibility that we could have the effect of this storm that early. But I want you to notice that there is a sense of a curve here, just a slight curve into the Friday time frame. So the thinking is that this storm is going to lift a little bit to the north. It's going to come toward us, come toward us, come toward us. Now don't take my line literally. It could be over here, it could be over here, but in general direction of us, and then potentially eventually make a turn to the north, and that's reflected on the risk area, taking us all the way into Sunday. And we can see more of a turn to the north, including places like North Florida and the Carolinas. But this is going to be very reminiscent, if you were here in 1999, excuse me, of Hurricane Floyd, where it came at us, was a fierce-looking hurricane coming right at us. It was forecast to turn, and we kept saying it's forecast to turn, let's hope, let's wait, let's see, and eventually it did. Now, there's no guarantee that this one will, so we're still in full monitor mode here today. We'll continue to be that way tomorrow, I think, but because it's moving along at a good clip now, we may have to move up the possibility of taking some action now that it's moving at 16 miles an hour. Again, with that future track showing some possibility of effect as early as Friday morning. We're going to have to evaluate that this afternoon.
Follow Hurricane Francis continuing its track along the east coast of Florida.
Well, we're going to talk to Roland, who just got the latest advisory. They come out every 6 hours, and the 5 o'clock advisory is out. And any changes to what we've seen in the last 2 advisories, Roland?
There has been a little change, Tony and Jackie, in that the Hurricane Center thinks that the forecast track is going to shift just a little bit more toward the south, or more toward central and south Florida. The point is that it's still too early. We're talking about a hurricane that's 1,100 miles away, and we want to know, is it going to affect us? Isn't it going to affect us? And there are so many things that are coming to play here in the atmosphere. It's just tough to pinpoint exactly where. But each day that goes by, we have a clearer and clearer idea as to what the hurricane is going to be doing. Let me show you what the kind of day it was we had here across South Florida. Beautiful. Most of the showers and storms drifted well out west, and the forecast first does call for a mixture of sunshine and clouds tomorrow. We may see a few showers in the morning. We may see a few showers scattered around throughout the day, because ahead of Hurricane Francis, we have this weak low in the upper levels of the atmosphere. It's not a tropical system or anything like that. It's just this little disturbance that's moving ahead of the storm. And notice there are a few clouds and a few scattered showers out here. So that's why we're saying maybe a few showers. But then after tomorrow, the dry air around the perimeter of Hurricane Francis begins to move towards South Florida, so our weather should be very nice. Now, as far as steering currents are concerned, what we are watching is a disturbance that's not a disturbance, but high pressure that's way out here over the northern Rockies. Notice how the atmosphere kind of takes a lift up here. It kind of humps right across the western states. This is high pressure that's going to continue to migrate from the west all the way across the eastern seaboard, and it is this high way out west that's going to determine what Hurricane Francis ends up doing as far as its possible impact on the southeastern United States. Right now, Francis is following this big Atlantic subtropical high pressure. There's a weak area of low pressure along the northeastern seaboard. This high is going to keep it strong. This high is going to continue to drive the hurricane in a general west-northwest direction. This trough is going to lift. The high pressure over the Rockies starts to build into the northeastern United States, and this high pressure, depending on where it is when Francis approaches from the southeast, will determine where Francis ends up going. If the high moves very rapidly offshore, then the hurricane may be allowed to turn more toward the north and toward the west. If the high moves slowly offshore and it gets right on top of the hurricane won't be able to move to the north. The high would push the hurricane more in a general west direction. So that's why we're saying anywhere from South Florida to the Carolinas, all depending on where that high pressure...
Pay too much close attention to only the path for 2 reasons. Number one, it changes, and number two, the hurricane is more than just a point on a map. And as we start to draw this out, you can see how the storm is expected to generally move in a west-northwest direction, moving to the north of the Bahamas, barely to the north of the Bahamas during the day tomorrow, and then very, very close to, if not very much into the central Bahamas by 2 p.m. on Thursday. By Friday at 2 o'clock, the storm is expected to move very close to the Grand Bahama Island with an error of about 100 miles or so on either side. Now, obviously, this does include parts of the Keys, also South Florida, all the way up to the north by Friday afternoon. So the storm could be north, it could be south. Each model run that comes in moves the storm a little indifferent. As a matter of fact, this particular model run takes the entire path that moves it a little bit farther to the south than the previous model runs. And if we're going to take a closer look here at Francis, we can see at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, the storm is expected to move in a general west-northwest direction. And here is probably the most dangerous time for the Bahamas, sometime during the early afternoon on Thursday, at least for the middle islands and the out islands of the Bahamas. Then the storm is expected to continue to move in a northwesterly direction, moving over Grand Bahama, as we mentioned, 2 p.m. on Friday, and then moving to the north. This path has been adjusted a little bit farther to the south in the last model run than it was before. The next model run may move it to the north. It may move it a little bit further to the south. Again, the emphasis is on the cone of air, not so much on the forecast track on this. I think we have one more.
And these little areas here, these dots, represent the forecast points from the National Hurricane Center over the next, say, 48 or 72 hours or so. And we're looking at this very close to their forecast track. Of course, hurricanes don't just take this perfectly smooth line. They rather wobble on that line and in the direction they want to go. And you just have to kind of average out the wobbles and see where the hurricane is going in the long term, in the average. But we do have a very powerful storm here. It is thankfully well north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, but it does have its eyes, unfortunately, on the Turks and Caicos Islands, southeast Bahamas, and eventually the rest of the Bahamian chain. So we'll keep you posted for you folks who live in the Bahamas as well. Here's 7 Storm Scan. We'll show you the bottom part of the cone, the origination point now at 5 p.m. with 140-mile-an-hour winds, a Category 4 storm. These rain bands lashing out now to the north coast of Puerto Rico, but just a glancing blow. Tropical storm warnings are out. There may be hurricane-force wind gusts in some of these outer bands, but the core of the system is well removed from Puerto Rico, so no extensive severe damage is anticipated over the island, but certainly flooding and gusty winds. Now we'll give you the central part of this cone, and notice by 2 p.m. Wednesday, somewhere in the southeast Bahamas as a 150-mile-an-hour storm. Category 5 begins at 156, so it's very close to becoming a 5. In fact, if the fluctuations in intensity were a little bit more, this would be a 5 during the day tomorrow. And continuing that into Thursday afternoon as the storm gets closer to the central and northern Bahamas. For you folks who live in Nassau, the center of the storm is going to be crucial. If it passes to your right, you'll be on the weaker side of it. If it passes over you to your left, you'll be in the more destructive part of it. We cannot tell you exactly where that's going at this point either, and you're certainly in that margin of error. And for you folks who live here in South Florida and the Keys, obviously, we are in the same path as the Bahamas, and we're in the orange part of this cone. So if you look at the yellow part, look how wide this is. It can be anywhere from the Gulf of Mexico to well out off the Carolina coast, but we are certainly in the margin of error, which is not even the largest margin of error, so it's something we have to watch totally. And the actual cone itself has shifted a little bit further to the south on this last advisory. Here are the latest coordinates on the storm. 20.5, 65.9, moving west at 17, winds are 140, and again 980 miles to the east-southeast of Miami, where there are now the warnings out for the Bahamas, watches for the central Bahamas. And it's all, you know, it's all based on this upper level high. We don't have this knight in shining armor cold front that's coming down to pick this thing up and curve it away from the U.S. This will be a southeast United States storm. It's a question of whether it'll be in Florida or whether it'll be in Georgia or the Carolinas, and it all depends on this upper level high and the western extent of it. Meanwhile, right now we have an upper level low coming through, so we are going to see, again, the chance of showers and thunderstorms possible anytime tonight and tomorrow. Lows around 80, highs in the low 90s. Winds will be increasing a little bit out of the east-northeast late tomorrow, and Friday, Saturday, even Sunday time frame, watching Francis. I'll see you at 6.
Tengan todos muy buenas tardes.
Bienvenidos.
Por tercera vez en un mes, la Florida debería prepararse para el impacto de una tormenta o un huracán.
Primero fue Bonnie, después Charley y ahora es Frances quien podría tal vez arruinarnos el fin de semana feriado. Vamos con nuestro meteorólogo John Morales, quien está vigilando de cerca la trayectoria de Frances, que antes va a arruinarle el día, por supuesto, a otros lugares. John.
Sí, bueno, ya lo ha hecho en partes del noreste del Caribe. Cerraron las escuelas, por ejemplo, las Islas Vírgenes en Puerto Rico también. Pero ha pasado muy poco ahí en esa área. Han habido algunas bandas de lluvia. Los vientos más fuertes que vi fueron de 36 millas por hora en el área de la isla de St. Thomas, en las Islas Vírgenes norteamericanas. Y como ven, el ojo del huracán claramente divisado desde el radar meteorológico allá en Puerto Rico. El huracán se está moviendo hacia el oeste-noroeste, o más bien hacia el oeste, pero digo oeste-noroeste porque lo veo subiendo un poquitito en las últimas horas mientras se ha ido moviendo sobre aguas del Océano Atlántico al norte de la isla. Es un huracán severo, tiene vientos de 140 millas por hora, un huracán de categoría 4, no lejos de ser categoría 5, y estaba localizado a las 5 de la tarde en 20,5 grados norte de latitud y 65,9 grados oeste de longitud. Vean como la presión central, que ayer andaba como en 950 y pico de milibaras, ya va por 939, es bien fuerte, pasando 140 millas al norte de San Juan. Oficialmente se mueve hacia el oeste a 17 millas por hora. Como pueden ver, en realidad no es enfilado directamente hacia el oeste, es un poquito al norte de rumbo oeste, y se ha mantenido en ese rumbo debido a la influencia de altas presiones localizadas al norte norte del sistema, por eso es que ven este cielo despejado ahí. Ese sistema de alta presión ha bloqueado el progreso de Frances, por lo menos en cuanto a dirección norte se refiere. También ha ido impulsándola hacia el oeste durante las últimas 48 horas, ahora desafortunadamente en camino al área de las Islas Bahamas. Sí hay áreas de baja presión, debilidades aquí cerca de la costa este del país, incluyendo la tormenta tropical Gaston, que todavía sigue viva. El problema es que todo esto que ven ahí está bastante débil y no estamos seguros que pueda tener algún factor o ser un factor sobre la trayectoria de Frances. Así que, ¿qué espera el Centro Nacional de Huracanes? Pues como ven, esperan una trayectoria en general hacia el oeste, girando hacia el noroeste, de tal manera de que el sábado estaría cerca de impactar la costa sureste de los Estados Unidos en algún lugar desde Cayo Hueso hasta posiblemente cercano al área de Carolina del Norte. Exactamente dónde no sabemos. Recuerden, no se puede enfocar en cada uno de esos puntos. Eso sencillamente les da a entender a ustedes la zona central de este amplio cono de incertidumbre que tenemos en pantalla. Y fíjense, hay un numerito 4 ahí, indica que llegaría como ciclón de categoría 4 a la costa sureste de los Estados Unidos.